I set up a makeshift observation post with my laptop.
Long before that night in September 2018, I used to think of Birchwood Avenue as the safest place on earth.
Glitches,
it was the kind of quiet Washington suburb where the mailman waved at your cat, where every porch had a wind chime, and where the loudest sound at night was rain sliding off gutters. I had moved there 3 years earlier, after my divorce. Trying to start over as a freelance web designer, I wasn't rich, but my little bungalow was mine.
I whispered to myself,
white siding, creaky floors,
I have to leave.
A small front garden that smelled like lavender after rain.
The fear had become unbearable.
I didn't have many neighbors.
Every sound triggered adrenaline.
To my left lived the Connollys,
the whispering,
an older couple
knocking,
who watched Jeopardy,
the chain swinging
every night.
It felt deliberate.
To my right,
personalized,
an empty rental that had been available soon,
or
for
whatever,
nearly a year.
Was doing this.
Maybe that's
my
why
habits,
I loved the solitude.
My schedule.
I could go days
name.
without speaking to anyone
I
except my clients and my cat, Milo,
but
who seemed perfectly content with the arrangement.
One evening,
that Monday night started like most others.
Slip between the trees.
I was hunched over my laptop, coding a client's website while a Pacific storm rattled our windows.
Only the old
Wi-Fi flickered like it always did during bad weather.
To my panic.
Then came the gravestone again. I muttered
by moonlight,
pushing my glasses up my nose.
Smaller.
When the connection dropped for the third time,
my mind spun.
I brewed a cup of chamomile tea.
Why me?
Wrapped myself in a throw blanket.
I wanted answers,
and opened the window,
but I didn't want to be
outside
long enough to find them. I called the local sheriff again, but officers found nothing.
Beneath the
land
flickering
was
street
too
lamp,
remote for cameras to
tall
capture
man stood
everything.
In the rain,
and the intruder left
he
no
wore
fingerprints,
a dark coat,
no evidence,
and didn't move.
My sense of reality
my house
fractured.
As if he were waiting
I questioned
for
my
something.
sanity.
The
Yet every time I passed the
whispered,
orchard, the chain swayed as if to
just
remind me that it
someone
wasn't
walking
imagination.
But there was something deliberate
the
about
following
his stillness.
Leaving half-finished
Even Milo
paintings,
noticed.
canvases, and
His
art
ears
supplies
pricked,
behind.
Tail twitching.
The old house had offered me
The man
solitude
stepped
and
off the
inspiration,
curb, slowly,
but it had also
like
shown
he
me
knew I
that
was
some
watching.
unknowns are better
My
left
pulse
alone.
quickened. I turned away.
Neighbors later told me that winter storms felled the apple
but the
tree
faint
nearest
sound of
the
his
grave.
shoes tapping on wet
Roots
pavement
curling
reached
around
my
the
ears.
buried chain.
Then,
No
silence.
explanation ever came for
I
who
told
carved
myself
my
not
initials,
to panic.
who left the gravestones,
Probably just a drunk.
or why the chain
I
moved
whispered.
when no wind blew.
But the unease settled
The
in my
cameras
chest like a
remained silent
stone.
on footage.
When I finally
Even as
worked
the
up the courage to
disturbances
glance out
continued.
again, he was gone.
Years later, I
still
sighed
with
dream of
relief,
that orchard. I
but that
sometimes
relief
catch
shattered
myself
seconds
waking
later.
at 3 a.m.
3 faint
imagining
taps
footsteps crunching
on the
on
glass
the gravel.
behind me.
Whispers just
My
beyond
reflection
the
stared
blinds.
back from the window pane.
I've never returned,
eyes wide,
and I don't plan
outside,
to.
glistening in the
But
porch
the experience
light, were
taught me
muddy
something
footprints leading
important.
right up to the door.
Some things in
My
life
breath
defy
caught.
reason.
I
but
slammed
they
the
demand
latch shut,
respect.
locked every window,
Curiosity
and
is
whispered,
human, but
"You're fine,
intuition
Lena.
is survival.
You're just tired."
When something feels
Then
wrong,
came the sound I'll never
trust
forget.
it. And
Footsteps
sometimes,
on my
leaving
back
is the
deck,
only way to
slow
protect
and
what's
heavy.
left of yourself.
I grabbed my
When
phone
your
and dialed
intuition
911,
signals danger,
whispering
don't
to the
ignore
operator,
it.
"Please,
Curiosity
there's
can
someone
be valuable,
outside my house."
but personal safety
The
must
voice on
come
the other
first.
end was calm,
Some
steady.
mysteries, no matter
Stay
how
somewhere
tempting,
safe, man.
are not worth
Officers
solving.
are on their way.
Leaving
Don't
is
hang up.
sometimes the bravest choice.
I hid in the upstairs bathroom, crouched beside the tub.
I used to
heart
love the
pounding.
quiet of our little semi-detached
The house was
on
silent
Laurel
except for
Row.
the faint metallic clink of the
34
back
years
door
old,
handle jiggling.
6-year-old daughter Emily.
I bit my
and
lips
a
so
husband
hard I
Ryan
tasted
who worked
blood.
the night shift across town.
When the flashing blue lights finally
Most
appeared,
evenings,
it was
I
just the
almost
two of us.
cried.
I'd tuck Emily
Two
into
officers
bed,
swept the
settle in
property,
with a cup of tea, but the man
and
was
let the
gone.
hum
Of the radiator lull us
They found
both to
fresh
sleep.
boot prints beneath every
That was
window,
normal, and a small
That was
crowbar
safe.
resting on my porch rail.
Until
it wasn't. One of the officers muttered. Emily had been restless lately. He was waiting for the right moment. She refused to sleep alone. That night,
someone whispered
I didn't
to her
sleep.
through the wall.
Milo
I
pressed
smiled,
against my side
brushing
while
off
the
her
room turned to
imagination.
mist outside.
Kids conjure up the oddest
Every creak
fears.
made me flinch. He talks to me
I
again.
didn't know
now.
it yet,
But
she
that
whispered
night was
one
only
evening,
the beginning.
clutching Mr.
The police were
Cuddles, her
kind,
stuffed bear.
but there wasn't much they could do.
Who, love? I asked.
Probably
trying
an
to sound
attempted
reassuring.
burglary, the grandpa
One
next
officer
door
said,
jotting
whispers
notes in
through
his
the vent.
pad. He says
Keep
he
your
can
doors
see me.
locked.
Get motion lights. I
Maybe
felt
a
my
camera
chest
system,
tighten,
but forced a laugh.
Do you think he'll come back?
Mr.
I asked.
Henley was old,
He hesitated.
reclusive,
They
harmless.
usually don't, but it's
Or
good
so
to be
I
cautious.
thought. I'd only met him
For
once.
days after, I jumped at every
He mumbled
noise.
about rubbish bins
I
and
ordered a
shuffled
ring
away,
camera, new
eyes
deadbolts,
downcast,
even a baseball
lonely
bat that
figure
I kept by
behind
the
his
bed.
frosted window.
Still, unease lingered.
Emily was
Every
my
night
child.
I found myself staring at the window.
If she was scared,
waiting for movement
I had
under
to
the street
listen.
lamp. Friends told me
That
to stay
night,
somewhere else for a
long
while,
after Emily had
but
dozed
leaving
off,
felt like
curled under
surrender.
her blanket.
Instead,
I heard it.
I tried to take
soft
control. I
tap,
joined
tap,
a
tap
neighborhood watch group online,
from the wall
asked the
beside her
Connollys
bed.
to keep an eye out.
My heart
Mr. Connolly
jumped.
nodded, his wrinkled
Tap.
face serious. Pause.
If I see anyone strange, you'll be the first to know.
I froze.
Days passed. Then
Every
weeks.
nerve alert.
Nothing happened.
It was too
The rain
rhythmic
kept
to be
coming.
a settling house.
The trees kept shedding
too
leaves.
precise for a loose
And
shutter.
I started to convince myself that maybe it was truly over. I even began working at a cafe downtown some evenings, just to be around people.
Silence.
But one night,
Sleep.
about a month later, I came
Every
home to
creak
find
in the
something
floor
small
sounded
but
deliberate.
chilling. My garden
Every
gate
groan
was
in the
open.
house felt like a message.
I always
told
latched
myself it was nothing.
Always.
But I didn't feel
I
safe
closed it,
anymore.
locking the hook in place.
The next morning,
but unease
I
crawled
couldn't
up my
ignore it.
spine again.
I unscrewed
Inside,
the air
everything
vent in
looked
Emily's room,
untouched,
expecting
until I
maybe a
walked into the
mouse or a
kitchen.
bird had found its way
On the
inside.
counter sat a wet leaf,
What I
shaped like a
found instead
footprint.
made my stomach
It
lurch.
must have blown in through the window,
A
I
tiny
told myself.
hole drilled straight through the vent metal.
Yet I hadn't opened a window
perfectly
all day.
aligned toward the neighbor's flat.
I checked the ring footage.
My fingers shook as I
Nothing.
traced it.
No motion
Someone had
alerts,
been looking through
no
here.
faces.
I called
Just
Ryan
rain
immediately.
falling in slow, steady
Something's
sheets.
not right, I said.
Still,
The vent. Someone's
Something
been
felt
looking in
wrong.
Emily's room.
like the house had been
Clara,
entered.
love, call the police right now.
That night,
He replied.
I dreamed
His
of the
voice
man
sharp.
again, standing under the lamp,
Officers arrived within
unmoving,
minutes.
watching.
They were calm,
When I
professional.
woke,
but I
the
could see
lamp
the gravity
outside
in
was
their
off
eyes.
for the first time since I'd lived
One of them
there.
unscrewed a loose outlet
darkness
cover
felt
behind
heavier
Emily's
than
bed and found
silence.
another hole,
By November,
perfectly
I'd
drilled,
grown jumpy
pointing
but
in the same
functional
direction.
again. I worked,
They used a fiber
met
camera
clients,
to peer through it.
even smiled
My
sometimes.
chest tightened as I
Then
imagined
one
someone
evening,
watching my
while
daughter
scrolling
sleep,
through emails,
recording,
I saw
noting,
a message from
waiting.
an unknown address.
When they had a warrant,
Subject:
they searched Mr.
You should
Henley's
really
flat.
close your curtains.
Beneath his quiet
I froze.
exterior was a dark,
The
meticulous
email had
obsession.
no name, no signature,
Electronics, hidden
just
cameras,
those 7 words.
a live feed pointed
I checked
directly
the
into
timestamp.
Emily's room.
10:32
Photos of
p.m.
neighborhood children lined his
That
shelves.
was minutes earlier.
Equipment for recording
My
and
curtains
observing,
were open.
all concealed
I
behind
rushed to the
ordinary
window,
furniture
yanked
and
them
bland
shut,
walls.
and turned off every light in the
When they
house.
handcuffed him,
My mind
Mr.
raced.
Henley glanced at me with a
Maybe
faint
it was
smile.
spam, a prank.
You should have kept the light off.
But deep down,
It's easier to
I
see
knew
in the
better.
dark.
the next
that
day,
smile will
I
haunt
filed
me
another
forever.
police report.
Even after
The
he was
officer on
arrested,
duty, a
sleep
young
didn't
woman named
return easily.
Ramirez, took
I
it
taped
seriously.
vents, covered
Do
outlets,
you have any idea
and
who might be
double-checked
doing
locks
this?
multiple times a night.
No, I said.
Emily
I
started
don't have
sleeping in her
enemies.
bed again,
I barely have
but
friends.
only with the hall light
She
spilling
promised
through
to
the
increase
doorway.
patrols in the area,
The house,
but patrols
once
don't
comforting,
stop shadows.
felt like a trap.
That week, more emails
every
came.
creak, every
You
whisper
still
of
make
the wind through
chamomile
the
tea at
vents
night.
made
You
me
looked
jump.
tired yesterday.
I
Rough
walked
night.
the rooms repeatedly at
Tell
night,
your cat I said
checking
hi.
the walls,
I
tracing
changed
the edges
passwords,
of electrical
shut down
fittings,
accounts,
scanning
bought
every corner
blackout
for another
curtains.
hole.
Yet somehow,
Ryan tried
the
to comfort
messages
me.
kept finding me.
It's
Different
over, Clara.
addresses, same tone.
He's gone. You're safe.
Whoever it was, they knew
I
my
nodded,
routines, my
grateful
habits,
for his calm,
even my fears.
but part of me knew the memory
I
would
stopped
never fully
sleeping.
leave. The
I'd
thought
sit
that a
in bed with
stranger could
Milo
live
in
so
my lap,
close and watch
phone
my
in hand,
daughter,
waiting
our
for morning.
family, made me
I felt my
hyper-aware.
sanity fray at the edges.
We began
But
slowly
what scared me
restoring
most
normalcy.
wasn't the intruder.
Lights on at night.
It was how
motion
invisible
sensors
he could be in
installed,
my digital
cameras
life.
pointed at the entryways.
In
I
December,
kept
the
journals
email
of every
stopped.
strange noise,
For almost 2
every
weeks,
sensation
nothing.
that seemed out of place.
Silence.
Control became my
I started
weapon
to breathe
against
again.
fear.
Even put up a
Weeks
small
turned into
Christmas
months.
tree.
The police
told
handled
myself
Mr.
he'd grown
Henley's case.
bored,
The evidence
moved on.
piled up, and he was
Then,
sentenced to years
On
behind
December
bars.
21st,
But the
the
emotional
doorbell rang
weight
at
didn't
10:45
disappear.
p.m.
I still caught myself
I froze.
glancing at the vents, listening
No
for
one visited
tapping,
me that late.
even in the daylight.
Through the peephole,
Emily
I saw
sometimes
nothing.
asked,
Just darkness.
"Mummy, he's not there
The bell
anymore,
rang
right?"
again,
I
followed
would
by
nod,
3 slow
forcing
knocks.
a smile.
Exactly
But
like
my
that
eyes
first
drifted
night.
to that wall,
My
painted
phone
over,
slipped from my hand.
patched,
I backed
silent.
away, whispering.
How many nights had she
Go
been
away.
watched without our knowledge?
Then a voice.
How easily
Low,
someone could
male,
hide behind
calm.
ordinary walls,
Lena,
blending in with the
Open the door.
mundane.
I just want
Every
to
time
talk.
the wind rattled the house or
I
a shadow
recognized
fell
it
strangely
immediately.
across the floor,
It was the same
My
voice
stomach
from one of the
twisted.
voicemails I'd received
I had
weeks
learned a
earlier.
hard lesson about
I
trust,
hadn't realized
safety,
it then,
and vigilance.
but hearing
The
it in
world looked
person
the same,
made everything
but
click.
I could no longer treat it as if I
I
were
dialed
fully safe
911
inside
again,
it.
whispering
Even
into the
friends'
phone.
houses, even
The
familiar
dispatcher kept me
places,
talking until the
carried new
sirens
caution.
came.
I
By the time
realized
they
how
arrived,
fragile our
the
illusions
man
of
was
security
gone.
can be.
But he'd left
It's not
something
that I lived
behind
in
on the
constant
porch
terror.
railing.
It's that
A
awareness
bum,
became
folded
permanent.
piece of paper.
A small,
Inside
necessary
a plastic
price for the
sleeve to
safety
keep
of
it
my
dry.
daughter.
It read,
Life eventually found a
"You
rhythm
shouldn't
again.
have called the cops."
Emily's laughter returned,
That night the police
brighter
stayed
than
with me until
before,
dawn.
filling the corners
owners of our
Ramirez
home
insisted I stay with a
Ryan's
friend.
shifts continued.
I packed a
Our
bag and
routines
drove to my
became
brother's
comforting,
house in Tacoma the next morning.
But I never forgot the
For
feeling
the
of a
first time in
stranger's
months,
eyes through the wall.
I felt safe.
The invasion of privacy,
passed.
so intimate and
I sold
invasive,
the house,
it
moved
reshaped
into
my
an apartment
perception of
downtown,
home. Surrounded by neighbors and street lights, I installed safety in subtle ways. Cameras, how to lock doors, recognize signs of danger. The police never found the instincts. No fingerprints on the crowbar, but to empower her. No trace from the emails. And I taught myself the same lessons. He vanished, reinforcing boundaries and vigilance. Life slowly returned to consume my daily life. But fear left its fingerprints on everything I did. Security is fragile. I checked locks twice. Danger isn't always obvious. Sometimes 3 times I avoided eye contact with strangers. I even stopped using my real name are only part of the protection. One spring awareness, preparedness, I was walking home from the grocery store risks are just as vital. A street lamp flickering is meant to be safe. But safety requires action, just a second, observation, a tall figure, and the willingness to recognize that even familiar spaces can harbor danger. And he was gone. When I tuck Emily in, I double-check the vents, glance at the walls, and take a deep breath, knowing the past has left its mark. Safety isn't just about the same house and alarms, under the same roof. It's about awareness. Yet the lessons remain. About trusting your instincts before it's too late. And the courage to protect those we love comes with exposure. Even when the world protecting feels your privacy means protecting your peace. Safety is never guaranteed by walls, doors, or locks alone. Never assume danger only happens to others. True protection comes from vigilance. And never forget that fear isn't weakness, and the courage to act when danger hides in plain sight. We must respect the fragility of what we consider secure. When you buy a new house, and teach both ourselves and our children new beginnings, to navigate the world with caution and mindfulness. The echo in the empty rooms. The promise of making it yours. Nobody tells you how a house on Cedar Avenue for its ghosts. My parents, it was early October, had gone downtown for a hospital fundraiser. When we moved into 12 and be home before midnight. A modest place to myself for the first time in the suburbs of Leeds. 17 years old, I say we, alone and bored. But that first week, it was just that's what I told myself. Sophie had taken the kids to Devon to visit her parents, up on the couch, giving me time to romantic comedy, finish a few plumbing repairs, and get used to the apartment was modest, the kind that smelled faintly of pine cleaner. I thought solitude would be a gift, but I loved it because it felt mine. Even the first few nights were calm. I'd come home from the engineering plant, fix the Hanlons lived next door, eat dinner in front of the TV. They weren't throwing a party, and sip a little scotch. That fact alone drummed against the window stillness even more. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock tick through the hallway. A sharp crash. I remember thinking, through the quiet, this is peace. My heart skipped a beat. Glass. By Friday night, I was halfway through a bottle of Glenlivet. Flipping through old records I hadn't played in years. Our duplex. I was humming along to Hotel California when the doorbell rang, low, slamming against each other like a storm. Then another behind drywall. Then 5 sharp rings in a row. TV, straining to hear another crash. I looked up at the video feed on my phone. I tiptoed to the doorbell, showed nothing. Parting the blinds, just no one on the porch, the narrow driveway, just the wind pushing at the trees. 2 hooded figures slipped into the shadows, nervously, moving fast. Probably kids. One carried a bag that swung heavily from their shoulders. The kind who got a kick out of playing ding-dong. My fingers tightened around my stormy night. My pulse was a drum beat in my ears. Locked the door and went upstairs. Then I smelled it. 10 minutes later came the pounding. Thin, lighter, teasing this time, curling under the baseboard. Hard. But in seconds it thickened like someone was trying to break the damn door suffocating heat. All right, that's enough, oh my God. I yelled, heading towards the entryway. Choking, I grabbed my jacket, keys, and phone, then bolted for the front door, and I saw a movement behind me, something the living room window. A low, heavy sound, 3 figures, and then a flash of orange filled the cracks of the wall. For a second, outside, I thought maybe the cold hit me like a slap. I could hear the sirens before I even saw the fire trucks. Red and blue lights painting the street against metal. A firefighter held me back, asking questions I couldn't answer fast enough. Masks burst through the door. There's nobody else inside, right? I couldn't place. I cried. One grabbed my arm. They assured me the Hanlon side was empty. Another pulled duct tape from his pocket. My chest was still tight around my wrist. My stomach felt hollow. Where's the vault? Hours later, demanded, wrapped in a foil blanket. I overheard an officer speaking to my parents. Don't lie. Another third incident tied to that address this year. Basement door. Quietly. Where is it? My mother's face turned pale. I just moved in. I stammered. She asked. There's no vault, no basement. Not your daughter. I swear. He replied. Wrong They tore the house apart like wild dogs. But it pulling open vents, kicking through boxes. I sat on the curb, pictures from the wall, and tried to process what had just happened. Muttering in a language I didn't know. The fire trucks had left. I could barely breathe. The smell of burnt wood lingered like an oppressive fog. One of them shouted, "Here, look at this!" Across the narrow space. He held up an old dust-covered frame he'd found behind the boiler. It was just charred beams. It was a property deed, blackened and skeletal. Not in my name, but in the driveways. I noticed Mr. and Mrs. Carlton. Only one set. The men froze. For a
They lit up
heartbeat
close to my window,
no one
and then
said
stopped,
anything.
like whoever had
Then
done
the leader
this had
cursed
paused
loudly.
to consider their work.
"Wrong house!"
That night,
he hissed.
my parents refused to let me
They
sleep
exchanged
alone.
looks, their
I lay
eyes
in bed
glinting
listening
through
to
the
the
masks.
faint hum of the city
And
outside.
just like that,
Every
as
creak
quickly
of
as
the
they'd
house
come,
amplified in my
they
mind.
bolted out the back door.
I kept imagining
vanishing
those
into the
hooded
storm.
figures. How easily
I
they
sat
could
there,
have mistaken our
shaking
side
so
for
hard the
theirs.
chair creaked beneath
And the
me.
terrifying
I could still
truth
smell
that
their
danger
sweat in the
doesn't
air.
always come from the street.
Minutes later,
It
I saw
sometimes
flashing
lives
blue
just
lights.
a few inches away.
A neighbor had heard the noise
The
and
next
called
morning,
it in.
the sun glinted
The police
weakly
found me
off
still tied up,
frost-covered roofs.
tape marks on
But
my
the warmth
wrists,
didn't reach me.
furniture overturned.
My parents tried to
drawers
reassure
dumped
me
across the floor.
while insurance inspectors
One
poked
officer
through the
said
rubble next
quietly,
door. But
"You're
I couldn't
lucky,
shake
mate.
the image of the
Looks
figures
like they
slipping
thought you
through
were
the dark.
someone else."
The way the flames
But that
had
was the
swallowed the
thing.
Hanlon's home
They
like it was
hadn't
nothing.
thought I was someone else.
I'm going to check on the
They
place.
thought the house was.
I told my mother.
The police
She shook
stayed
her
until
head.
3 a.m., dusting
You've had
for
enough
prints,
for one night,
taking
Josie.
statements.
Stay here.
The detective,
But
a
I had to see it
square-jawed
for
guy
myself.
named Willis,
I
showed
stepped
me the
gingerly
old
along
property
the
deed
sidewalk,
they'd found.
crunching
The
frozen
Carltons
leaves
owned
under
this place
foot.
for 20 years.
The
he
duplex's
said.
other half was
Any idea
unrecognizable.
who they are?
Smoke-stained.
Never met them.
Black beams leaning
said.
like broken teeth.
We bought the
I
house through
crouched
an agent.
to look
I
closer.
assumed they moved abroad.
Someone had left a door
Willis
unlocked,
exchanged a look with
probably
another
in the
officer.
chaos of evacuation.
You assumed right. And
We've
that
had
was
their
when I
names
noticed
come
it.
up in a financial
A pair of
investigation.
black
Offshore
gloves,
accounts,
slightly singed,
missing funds
lying
near the doorway.
Not your problem anymore.
Whoever had
but
been
looks
here
like
had
your
taken
house used
risks
to be
I
part of
couldn't
their
imagine.
operation.
Back inside,
I stared at the
I
wreckage.
kept glancing at the wall
Broken
separating
glass,
our homes.
torn wallpaper.
I could almost
muddy
hear the faint
blueprints.
echoes of last night.
My
The
home,
crash, the
brand
shouting. I
new,
wondered if
a week
anyone was
ago,
listening now.
already
If the
felt
people
poisoned.
responsible had lingered
For
nearby,
days, I couldn't
planning another
relax.
hit.
Every
Fear
creak made
gnawed
my
at
heart
the edges
race.
of my mind.
Every passing
Every
car's
shadow looked
headlights sent
taller.
shadows crawling
Every
across
creak
the
sounded
ceiling.
deliberate.
I replaced the
By
locks,
afternoon,
bought cameras,
the city had sent
even
fire
installed a
inspectors
motion
and police
sensor that
again,
pinged my phone
asking
if anyone got
questions
too
I
close.
didn't have answers for.
Still, I didn't
Did you
sleep.
see anyone suspicious?
When Sophie and the
Any
kids
cars
came
parked
home,
nearby?
I tried to downplay
Anything
it.
at all?
Wrong house, wrong
I
night.
described the hooded
I said,
figures,
forcing a
the
smile.
bag, the single set
But
of
she could see
blueprints.
through me.
They took
Every
notes
time the
and
doorbell
promised to
rang,
keep
I
watch,
flinched.
but promises
Every
and
time the kids
situations
ran
like
up the
this
stairs too
felt
fast,
thin.
I yelled
That
at them
night
to
I
slow
stayed
down.
on the
I
couch,
turned paranoid.
lights on,
and we all
felt
felt
in
it.
hand.
One evening,
Every
Sophie found
sound,
me sitting in the
wind
dark
rattling
living room,
against the siding,
staring at the
a
front
distant
door.
dog barking,
Set me
Daniel,
on edge, she said softly.
My parents tried to watch
We're
TV
safe
to distract
now.
themselves.
You can't
but
keep
I couldn't
living like
focus.
this.
I imagined
But she
the
didn't hear
intruders
what I
across the
heard.
street,
That
walking the
faint
line
creak
between
outside.
homes, maybe
Like
even
someone
watching.
testing a step.
I wanted to believe
She
it had
didn't
been a
see
mistake,
the flicker of light
a
that
one-off,
sometimes crossed the
but
porch
deep
camera
down,
at night.
I knew it wasn't random.
The police never caught the intruders.
Someone wanted to scare the
the
Hanlons.
Carltons, and we
The
had been
couple who
unlucky
owned
enough
the
to be in
house
the wrong
before us
place, had disappeared
at the wrong time.
Their assets frozen.
Days passed.
Their names whispered in
and the
headlines
fire
about
became a
tax
local
fraud
story.
and stolen money.
News
And
crews
me.
came.
I
Interviews
was
were
just the
conducted.
guy who happened to
and
buy their
neighbors
hiding
whispered
place.
behind curtains.
Weeks passed.
I kept noticing
The
small
repairs were
things.
finished, and the
The
neighbors
faint
tried
smell
to
of
move
smoke
on.
that lingered in the hallway.
Everyone wanted to forget.
The subtle dents in the
But
walls
some
where
nights,
soot had
the
settled.
silence in that house
Each
felt
time I
heavier
heard
than
movement
noise.
in the duplex, my stomach
It was a
lurched.
Thursday when the doorbell
One
rang
afternoon,
again.
the police knocked Officer
11:45
Henderson introduced
p.m.
himself. A young
I
man
froze,
with tired eyes.
glass halfway to my lips.
We're stepping up patrols.
The sound was soft.
He said, I want
Once,
you to stay alert
then twice,
and call immediately if
I
anything
turned
seems
to the
off,
video
even
feed.
small things.
Nothing.
I nodded, too
Just
anxious
darkness.
to speak. I started
My
keeping a
stomach
journal
knotted.
of noises, people, and sights.
I stood up slowly.
Every time I heard a
Heart
crash,
pounding.
every sudden
and
movement
whispered
to
to
myself,
myself,
I recorded it.
It's the wind.
It helped me feel some
Just
control
the
over a
wind.
situation that had felt so
Then
uncontrollable.
it rang again.
I even talked to
I
neighbors
didn't
who
move
weren't
for a full
involved,
minute.
sharing information
The clock
cautiously.
ticked.
Some had
Rain
seen
fell.
strange cars idling near
And
the
then
duplex weeks before.
It stopped.
Others remembered hearing fights late at
No more
night.
ringing.
Slowly, I
Just
realized I
stillness.
wasn't alone in my fear. The next morning, people
I checked
wanted
the
safety
camera footage,
too. And there
In a
it
weird
was.
way,
That sense
a
of shared
faint,
concern
blurry
gave me a
silhouette
small
standing at the
comfort,
edge of the driveway
though it didn't
at
erase the memory of
11:46,
the fire or the
perfectly
image of those
still,
hooded figures weeks
not
past.
moving, but the
Not
tension never
approaching.
fully eased.
Just watching.
I noticed things. When
A
I
scratch
showed
on the
Sophie,
window
she
frame.
went pale.
The faint smear of something
Maybe
dark
it's
on the
one of
side
them.
porch. footage, she whispered.
Every detail
I called Detective
significant.
Willis again. Officer
He came by
Henderson
that
and his team
afternoon,
occasionally studied
in,
the footage, but the
sighed.
trail went cold more often
Too
than not.
grainy
To tell could be a trick of the light.
One evening,
or a
I
neighbor
was in my
walking a
room,
dog, headphones on, but I'll put in
trying
for an
to
extra
study.
patrol.
Through the
That
thin
night,
wall,
I left
heard
the lights
muffled
on.
footsteps.
By
Soft
November,
but
I
deliberate.
convinced myself to sell the house.
My breath
Sophie
hitched.
agreed. I pressed
She
my ear
wanted
closer,
to leave,
to
hearing
start
a whisper
fresh
that
somewhere.
sounded like
no
my
one knew
name.
our names.
Heart racing.
Then the letter came.
I grabbed my phone.
No return address.
The hallway was empty.
Just a folded envelope.
I texted my
through
parents.
the mail slot.
They were in bed,
Inside,
and waited for the
page.
comfort of someone else in the house.
We never found it.
Checked
Silence.
behind the cellar wall. It dawned on me.
My hands shook
Danger
as I
had been
read it.
close. Always closer
Behind
than
the
I
cellar
wanted to
wall.
admit. We didn't. I had felt
Have
safe,
a cellar.
alone in my quiet
But
duplex.
something in me couldn't let it
But
go.
the reality was that threats
I
could
grabbed a
live on the other
flashlight,
side of a wall.
went down to the
unseen,
utility room,
and started knocking on the
but
plaster.
real. Near
That
the far
realization
corner, the
reshaped
sound
how I
changed.
moved through my own
Hollow.
home. How I locked
I pulled
doors.
at the edge of the drywall
How I
until a
slept.
small panel came loose.
Months later, behind
The
it was a
duplex
narrow,
was rebuilt.
brick-lined space barely 2 feet
We
wide.
moved briefly.
Though my
Inside,
parents made sure the
wrapped
new
in
place
plastic,
felt safer,
was a metal box.
better locks, cameras,
My breath
motion
caught.
sensors. I didn't open it.
I tried to let the memory fade.
I couldn't. But every sudden
Instead,
crash,
I called Willis.
every whispered argument
When
in
he
the
arrived with
distance,
2 other officers,
triggered
they
the
pried
old
it open.
fear.
Inside
Safety is
were
never
wads of British
guaranteed,
pounds,
even in places
several
we think we
passports,
know.
and a small USB
Danger
drive.
doesn't always come from outside.
Willis whistled
It can
softly.
live just inches away.
Looks like your
behind
intruders were
walls,
right after all.
Behind doors, hidden
The money
in
was
normalcy.
seized as evidence. The
Awareness,
police said I'd done the right
caution,
thing,
and
but
respect
that didn't
for our
help me sleep any
vulnerability
better.
became my
Because
daily
now,
habits.
Someone out there knew
Even
we'd
now,
found what they,
years later,
couldn't.
Whenever I hear glass shatter,
We moved out by
I think
Christmas.
of the night the fire came
I never
too
went
close.
back to Amberwood Close.
Of the hooded figures
But
on the wrong
sometimes,
wall,
in the quiet of
and the
night,
fragility
when I'm
of what
lying
we
beside
call
Sophie,
safety.
I'll hear it in my mind.
Life teaches you lessons
the chime
in
of that
subtle
doorbell,
ways,
echoing
sometimes
like
with
a warning
smoke
I
and
learned
fire.
later.
Sometimes
that the
the
intruders had been
silence and
part of a
fear,
crime ring tied to
but
the
always
Carltons.
in ways that stick with you.
They were arrested in another county
True
months after we
safety
moved.
isn't about walls or locks.
None of them mentioned the
It's
break-in.
about awareness.
But what haunts me
preparedness,
most isn't their faces.
and respecting the fragility
It's
of the,
the
world
feeling
around
that someone
you.
else might come one day.
Danger can exist
Someone who still
close to
believes
home,
the vault holds
and
more.
vigilance,
Every
caution,
time the wind rattles
and
the
presence of
windows,
mind are essential.
every time a delivery driver
Even in
knocks
the most
twice,
familiar places.
I freeze. I see those silhouettes again. Flashlights
Chicago
cutting
winters
through the
always had a
rain.
way of making me feel
Peace is
smaller.
fragile. Snow
Safety
swirled
is
along the
temporary.
streets like it was trying to
I learned
erase
that
everything
too late.
beneath it. Even
And
in
the
the
West
safest
Loop at night
neighborhoods,
was
danger
quieter
doesn't
than I'd
always
ever
knock
remembered.
for you.
I had just returned from my
Sometimes
night
it knocks
shift
for
at
the
the
ones who
printing
came
company.
before.
Walking past
Be
shuttered
cautious
restaurants
about
and
the
empty
past you
sidewalks,
inherit.
clutching
For
every
every place
place
holds a
reheated
history
coffee in
you
one
can't
hand
always see,
and a leftover container in the other.
My 7th floor apartment
You
felt
can
like a
always tell
refuge.
when November is
Small,
ending in Portland.
cramped.
The
Familiar.
rain doesn't just fall.
I slid the container into the
breathes.
microwave.
It hums.
The hum filling the
It fills
kitchen.
the air with a low
The
kind of
radiator
rhythm
rattled softly
that makes
behind
the
me,
world feel
and I
smaller.
sank into the couch, letting the
The city
warmth
turns
seep through my
gray and
jacket.
quiet,
And
that's
people
when it
huddle
happened.
indoors. The
Pretending
intercom
the weather
buzzed,
isn't slowly
sharp,
pulling them apart.
urgent.
That's what I
froze,
loved about it.
letting my hand hover in
quiet.
midair. Nobody ever
The way it
used
gave
it.
me permission to
Not since the
disappear
building
for a while.
installed the panel 5 years ago.
It was the last weekend
Another
of November
buzz.
2019.
This time a series of
and I
short,
was
frantic
alone in the little
bursts.
craftsman house
My
I
pulse
rented with
quickened.
my roommate, Clara.
I pressed the talk button
She'd
and
gone
said
to Seattle
cautiously,
to visit her parents,
Yeah.
which meant I finally had
Static.
the place to myself.
Then a soft,
No small
shaky
talk,
voice.
no music,
Please,
no footsteps from the
let me
room
in.
across the hall.
Someone's following
Just me, a blanket, and the rain.
I frowned.
I
Heart
remember
hammering.
lighting a candle.
Who's this?
Cedarwood and amber.
The camera feed in the
and
lobby
curling
showed
up on
only
the couch
fuzzy
with a
static.
glass of red wine. I put on
Broken
some
months
old
ago.
true crime documentary.
Are you hurt?
The kind I'd seen a dozen
pause.
times before.
Then in a whisper,
And let the voices blur into
You
the
don't
sound
remember
of
me,
thunder
do you?
outside.
My
My
throat
phone
tightened.
buzzed a few times from
I
work
leaned
emails,
closer to the
but I
intercom.
ignored them.
What?
I didn't want
Who
anyone
are
or
you?
anything from the real world
You
creeping
used to
into
live
this
in
small
3B.
bubble of calm.
The voice said, calm
The house
now.
creaked,
Almost
the way old
eerily
houses
so.
do, as if
3B.
exhaling after years of holding
My
its
old
breath.
apartment.
I
The one I
didn't
left
mind.
last spring after the
I'd grown
break-in.
used to its noises.
I remembered
The pipes,
coming home to
the
shattered
wind,
glass,
the faint
scattered
scratch of branches
photographs,
against the
but
window.
nothing stolen.
But that night,
The police had
something
said it
about
wasn't
it
theft.
felt different.
Someone had been watching.
The air was heavier.
I'd
thicker.
moved upstairs to Unit
Every
7B,
sound seemed sharper.
hoping to forget.
I blamed it on the storm.
Who is this?
It was
I
11:58
repeated,
p.m. when
louder
the first
this
text
time.
came.
The intercom
My phone was on the
clicked.
couch.
Silence.
I just stood up to check the front
Then
door
faintly,
because it had rattled in the
You
wind.
never fixed the window lock.
When I reached for the lock,
my eyes
phone
shot to
buzzed.
the living room
The
window.
screen glowing against the
The
dim
curtain
light.
swayed gently.
The message was from an
though
unknown
the radiator
number.
heat was off.
It said,
The
"Don't
lock.
lock me out."
I had checked it earlier.
At first, I laughed.
Was unlatched.
A nervous, ridiculous
I
kind of
swallowed
laugh.
hard.
It had to be Clara.
Whoever you
I
are.
thought maybe she was
I'm
pranking
calling
me,
the police.
pretending to be
I
one of those
whispered.
horror movie texters.
Before I could.
But the
buzzer
timing,
shrieked again.
The timing made me
Long,
stop smiling.
piercing.
Another message
yanked the
came.
cord from the wall and
Please,
stumbled back,
it's cold out
fumbling
here.
for my phone.
I
Then,
froze.
tap,
My
tap,
hand
tap.
still rested on the lock.
The glass
I hadn't
rattled.
turned it yet. A muddy
chill
handprint
ran
appeared,
through me that had
smeared
nothing to do
across
with the
inside
draft
of the
sneaking
pane.
under the door.
My heart slammed against
I
my
locked it
ribs
quickly,
as I realized
sliding the
someone had
bolt
been
with a
there,
sharp click,
right
and
inside
stepped
my
back.
apartment, watching.
The storm outside
waiting.
howled.
When the
For a
officers
moment, I
arrived,
swore I heard
the
movement.
lobby door was locked
Faint,
from the inside,
like shoes brushing
nobody
against the
outside.
porch.
On the
Maya,
fire escape,
you're just
partially
scaring
buried
yourself.
in snow,
I
were
muttered.
footprints leading from the alley.
Talking out loud made it feel less
Inside,
real.
near my window,
But then
were
came the
streaks
next
of grease
message.
and fragments of wet hair
You
caught
shouldn't
in the
have done
latch.
that.
The detective
The
asked
lights
about
flickered.
anyone who had lived in 3B.
Somewhere
After
deep
me, I
in the
didn't know
house,
anyone.
something
The unit
shifted.
had been vacant. A low
But
scraping
checking the
sound
records revealed one
like a
chilling
chair
fact.
being dragged across
A
the
missing
kitchen
person
floor.
report
from April.
And that was when my calm
A
night
22-year-old
turned into
girl,
something else
last seen
entirely.
leaving Unit 3B
I stood
after
in the
police
hallway,
left.
every nerve
couldn't sleep.
awake. I told
Every
myself
sound
the
in the
sound was
apartment became
nothing.
amplified.
Maybe wind
The
pushing
radiator's
through the
gentle
vents,
groan, the
maybe
hum
a
of the
vibration
refrigerator,
from
the
thunder
distant
shaking
traffic
the floors.
flow.
But the sound
Every
came
shadow
again,
seemed to hold movement.
slow.
I kept glancing at
Deliberate.
the window, imagining
The
someone
kitchen was
standing
dark
there,
except for
staring
the
in.
weak glow from the street
I called
lamp
my
filtering
sister,
through the
trying
curtains.
to keep my voice
I
steady.
could just make out the shape of the dining
You
table.
won't believe what just happened.
Hello?
I began.
My
I
voice
told her
cracked
about
as
the
I called
intercom,
out.
the voice,
No
the
answer.
handprint.
I gripped
She
my
gasped
phone like
and
a
told me
weapon,
to stay
my
somewhere
thumb
else.
hovering over the call
But the thought
button.
of leaving my
I took one
apartment,
cautious
my
step
routines,
forward,
my
then
life,
another.
felt
My socks
impossible.
slid a little on the hardwood floor.
The next
The
morning,
scraping
I
stopped.
visited the building
I exhaled
office.
slowly.
I asked about the
Okay,
intercom system,
it's fine,
any
I
maintenance
whispered.
records,
You're
and whether
losing
anyone
it.
knew had access
just-
to 3B.
The phone buzzed again.
The manager shrugged.
Come sit with me.
No one since you left.
The words made
she
my
said.
stomach turn.
The unit's been
I
empty
looked up,
aside from inspections.
And that's when I saw
Strange
her.
stuff happens in old buildings.
Someone,
Strange
woman,
didn't cut it.
was sitting at
I
the
wanted
table.
answers.
Her hair was
I
dripping
began
wet.
retracing my steps.
Her clothes
memories
clinging
of
to
the
her
break-in
skin.
flooding back.
She didn't
The
move.
shattered window.
Didn't even
the
look at
scattered
me.
photographs.
Clara.
Nothing had been stolen.
I whispered,
but someone had
even though I
clearly
knew it
been
wasn't her.
inside. Observing,
The
I
woman's
felt
head
a cold
tilted slightly,
realization settle
and I
over
swear
me.
I heard a faint sound.
Whoever had broken
like
in
a breath,
before could still
but
know
distorted.
my
I
habits,
blinked.
my routines.
My heart was hammering.
Perhaps even my new apartment.
When I opened my eyes
Later
again,
that day,
the chair across
I
from her
returned
was
to
pulled
3B.
out just an inch farther
The door
than
was
before.
empty,
I
silent,
backed away slowly,
unremarkable.
step by step,
but I noticed
until I hit
scratches on
the edge of the
windowsill.
couch.
Faint enough
My
that I
hands
hadn't
were
seen
shaking
them last
so
spring.
badly I dropped my
I
phone.
pressed my fingers to the grooves.
When I picked it up again,
they were fresh.
The screen was
or
black,
at least recent.
dead battery.
Someone had been here.
That was the moment
The
I
thought
ran.
twisted my stomach.
The front door was wide open.
Detectives
The lock I
returned
had
the
turned
next
minutes ago
afternoon.
was bent, twisted.
We found her,
as if someone had
one
forced
said
it.
quietly, showing me a
Rain
photo
blew
from
inside,
the police database.
cold against my face.
A young woman.
I ran
Scared
barefoot into
eyes,
the storm,
hair
clutching
damp
my
and
phone,
tangled.
and called
I
911.
realized with a jolt.
My voice trembled
This
so
must
much
have been
the
the voice
dispatcher
on the
had to ask
intercom.
me to repeat the address twice.
She had been living, trapped somehow.
The
in
police
shadow of
arrived
my
in
old
less than 10
apartment.
minutes.
I had nightmares that night.
The blue and red
Every
lights
intercom
painted
buzz,
everything
every
unreal,
cough from the radiator
like
felt
I was
her
watching
whisper.
someone else's nightmare.
I imagined the girl crouched behind walls,
Inside,
hiding.
the house was silent.
reaching out for help.
The officers
I
searched
pictured
every
the person
room.
who had trapped
No
her,
one was there.
watching.
The
waiting
back
for
door
the
was
perfect
locked.
moment to act.
The windows were intact.
I started documenting
But in the
everything.
kitchen,
Noises,
one chair was slightly pulled out.
irregularities.
Strangers in the
And on
lobby,
the table, right where the
unmarked
woman had been
cars on the
sitting, was
street.
my phone.
It became an
Only
obsession.
I
My
had it in my
routine,
hand.
once simple and quiet,
When the officer
turned
picked it
into
up, the screen
surveillance.
lit with a message draft.
Every day, I
One
wondered what
line,
had been happening in
half-typed.
3B.
Don't lock me out
and
again.
whether I had unknowingly stepped into danger.
I don't remember much
just
after
by moving
that.
back
I remember
into my
sitting
old
on the
building.
porch
Weeks
wrapped in
went
a
by.
blanket.
The
Shaking
girl was
so hard I
recovered,
could barely hold
but
the
the
cup
man
of tea a
responsible
neighbor brought
remained
me.
at large.
The
Police
officer
had
said
traced
maybe
some
it was a
digital
hacker
footprints,
prank.
online
That
forums,
sometimes scammers
Craigslist
could
messages,
remotely control
patterns
phones,
of vacancy,
send fake
but he was
messages.
elusive. I
But
found
that
myself
didn't explain
constantly
the
on
open
edge,
door.
checking locks,
Or the woman.
peering down the fire escape,
I moved
listening
out
to
2
the
weeks
faint
later.
hum of old wiring.
Clara
I
helped
even
me
installed
pack.
cameras outside my apartment.
She kept saying how
Each
sorry
night,
she was
I
for
would sit
leaving
in the
me
dark,
alone that
watching the
weekend.
monitors,
When
imagining
I turned
shapes
in the
moving
keys,
through snow,
the landlord,
wondering
an
if
older
someone
man
was
with
returning.
kind eyes,
My friends
hesitated
teased me
before
at
signing
first,
the final papers.
but they didn't understand
You
the
know,
unease that
he
comes
said,
from feeling like
the
someone
girl
has
who
been
lived there
inside your
before you,
life. She moved out in a
unnoticed,
hurry too,
while you slept, kept saying
cooked
someone
and
was trying
lived.
to get in at night.
I began
I thought she
speaking
was
to
just
the neighbors
nervous.
more,
for, living alone, quietly asking questions. What happened to her? Looking for patterns, I asked. Any information that could help police? No idea. She stopped answering calls. People loitering near the building in the weeks before the girl's disappearance. I didn't answer. Others had noticed odd deliveries to empty units. Everyone agreed something was wrong, apartment across the city, no one could pinpoint what. I plugged in my phone before bed. Months passed. For a long time I stared at the screen. The girl recovered physically, At midnight,
knew
it lit up
scars
once.
lingered in ways
A
we
faint
don't always
flash.
see.
No sound,
The police
no
kept
message.
watch, patrolling the
Just a
building,
notification that
and my
vanished
life
before I
returned
could read
somewhat
it.
to normal.
It's been years now.
But the quiet,
that
2025
comforting silence
of my apartment
I still live in Portland.
never felt the
So
same.
never
I
learned
learned
to
to lock
again.
every window,
Apartments
check
feel
the
safer.
fire escape nightly.
You can hear your neighbors
and
through the
question even the
walls.
smallest
You're
irregularities.
never fully alone.
I learned that
But
the
every
world can
November,
harbor
when the
danger
storms
even in
roll in
familiar
and the rain
places,
hums against
that
the
safety
windows.
is never
I
guaranteed
remember
by
that
walls
house.
or locks alone.
The creak of the floorboards,
Awareness,
the hum
vigilance,
of the
and immediate
candle,
action.
the
were as
voice I
essential
never
as
heard
anything
but
else.
somehow felt.
Even now,
Sometimes I think
years
about that
later,
message.
I pause at the intercom,
Don't lock me out.
glance at a shadow, and
I
remember
wonder
the
if it
night
was
a
a
voice
warning,
called out
not
from
a
the
threat.
past.
Maybe someone,
Life
or
moves
something,
forward,
really
but I
was
carry
out
the
there that
lesson
night,
with me.
not trying to hurt
Safety
me,
is fragile,
but trying to come home.
and sometimes
Or
the
maybe
most
the house
ordinary
just wanted to be
spaces can
remembered.
conceal the most extraordinary
Either way,
danger.
I always
True
lock my doors
safety
now.
is not guaranteed
Always
by
check
walls,
them twice.
locks, or routines.
And every year, on
it
the last
requires
weekend of
vigilance,
November,
awareness,
my phone lights
and the
up at
courage
exactly
to act when danger
11:58
hides
p.m.
in familiar places.
One silent,
Danger
flickering
can
glow
be
in the
closer
dark.
than we imagine.
No message, no
and
number.
preparedness
Just a reminder.
is the only protection we truly control.
I never thought moving to Asheville would mark the beginning of the worst
rain
year
had
of my
been
life.
relentless all evening.
When I signed that lease in
drumming
early
against the
2022,
windows of flat
I imagined
14B
peace,
like it had a message
quiet
to deliver.
evenings after my diner shifts,
Bristol's
my own little
auto
sanctuary
chill
tucked
crept
among
under
the
the
pine
door
trees. I was
and
25,
through the drafty window frames.
single, but
and
I barely
proud that
noticed I was
finally
managed to
Elena Ward,
afford a place
29,
without roommates.
a social worker who had
The
spent the last
one-bedroom
3
apartment
weeks
sat
moving
at the end of a
between
gravel
crisis
drive
calls,
that wound off a
clients,
country
and
road.
paperwork.
The landlord called it cozy.
Finally, tonight,
That was a nice way of
I
saying
had the apartment to
small
myself.
and a little creepy.
I poured a glass of red
I'd
wine
come from
and sank
Raleigh,
into the couch,
burned out and desperate
dimming the
for
lights
change.
to a soft golden glow.
My new job at the 24-hour
crime
diner seemed
documentaries
like a
had become
decent
a guilty
start.
comfort for me.
The customers were mostly
Half for the
truckers and
story,
locals.
half to
They
remind
tipped
myself
okay,
that other people
and I didn't
had
mind the
worse
smell
nights
of the
than
coffee
mine.
clinging to my hair.
My laptop
After
hummed
years of
softly as I
noise and
replied to a
roommates
few
who never
emails,
cleaned their dishes,
fingers flying
that
across
apartment
the
felt like
keyboard.
freedom.
The building was
The
old.
first few weeks went fine.
Pipes groaned when
The
someone
flickering
upstairs
porch
ran
light
water,
annoyed me,
and thin
but I never
walls
got
made
around
every
to
sound
changing
a
it.
little too intimate. I could hear my
On March
neighbor's
4th,
television,
I worked a double
as
shift
if it
that
were
left
in my
me dead
own
on my
room.
feet.
Normally,
Rain was starting to
it was a
fall when I
comfort,
pulled into the
a
drive
background
close to
murmur.
midnight. I remember thinking
Tonight,
how peaceful the
it
woods
felt like a
sounded,
warning.
how good it felt to
At
be alone.
11:42 p.m., the
I
landline
changed
rang.
into sweats,
My
tossed my
landline.
phone on the couch,
I rarely
and let
used
the
it.
TV play
For a moment,
infomercials
I
until
thought
I
my eyes
drifted
were playing
off.
tricks.
At
I stared at the
3:17
tiny
a.m.,
screen.
the doorbell rang.
The number flashing back
It
at me
startled
wasn't
me so
someone
badly
else's.
I almost fell off
It was
the
my
couch.
own.
It rang again.
I laughed nervously.
Longer this time.
Maybe fatigue was
I
making me
grabbed
see
the blanket
things.
around my shoulders
But curiosity
and stumbled
won
toward the
over
door,
fear. I picked
my
up.
heart thudding.
Hello.
Who rings a doorbell
A
at that
man's
hour?
voice, polite and toneless,
Through the
responded.
peephole, I saw
Good
a man
evening,
on the
Elena.
porch.
You left
He
your
wore
kitchen
a
light
dark
on.
jacket and held a clipboard.
My heart stopped.
The brim of his cap
Sorry,
shadowing his
who is
face.
this? There was a
He
soft
smiled
chuckle.
when he saw movement behind the peephole.
You should turn it off
Evening,
before
miss,
it gets their attention.
he said, voice
The
calm
line
and
went
low.
dead.
Sorry
I
to wake
froze.
you. Late
Staring
night
toward the
drop-off
dark
mix up.
hallway leading to my
Got a
kitchen.
package for you. Just need
Sure
a
enough,
signature.
the light was still on.
Something
My
about his
laughter
tone
felt
didn't fit
brittle.
the apology.
I told myself
I
it was a
hesitated.
prank, a coincidence.
What company are you from?
Maybe a neighbor who had my number.
He
I turned
tilted
off
his
the
head
light,
slightly,
locked the
smile
door, and
stretching.
tried to relax.
For a heartbeat, he said
Then,
nothing.
the intercom
Then
buzzed.
softly,
My
I can hear
stomach
your
sank.
TV inside, Emma.
The building's screen flickered
The
to
sound
life,
of my name from a
showing a
stranger's
distorted
mouth
black and
froze
white
me.
image of a man in a
My
raincoat
name
holding
wasn't
a
on the
paper
mailbox.
bag.
He
The
didn't
lease
move.
hadn't even been
Didn't
processed
look up.
fully. I pressed
Nobody
the
in
button.
town knew me yet.
Who is it?
I'm
Delivery
calling
for
the
Elena
police,
Ward,
I said,
the man said,
forcing my
calm,
voice steady.
almost low.
Silence.
When
I looked
didn't
again,
order anything.
The porch was empty.
I stammered.
I killed the lights.
After a pause, he
hands
said,
shaking,
You didn't.
and whispered into my phone to
But he did.
911.
Then
The
the screen
dispatcher
went
kept
black.
me calm while I described him.
My pulse raced
As
as
I
I called
talked,
Liam,
Faint
my
crunches
coworker
of
and
gravel
closest
circled
friend.
the building.
Lock everything and call the
Slow,
police.
Deliberate.
He instructed immediately.
Then came scratching
His
at the
voice
kitchen
tense.
window. Like a
I
coin
obeyed,
dragged across glass.
checking every window.
I locked myself
every
in the
lock,
bathroom,
every
clutching the
chain.
phone until blue and red lights
And yet,
finally washed through
the
the
kitchen
blinds.
light flickered back on.
Officers searched the property but
My
found
knees
no
buckled.
one. Muddy
I
footprints
crept
led
closer,
up to the door,
keeping the
and
chain
a fake
latched,
delivery label,
and noticed
printed
faint
with
movement.
my full name, was
A
taped
shadow
beside the
handle, shifting back and forth.
They took a report. I didn't sleep the rest of the night.
My phone buzzed.
The cops said it was
Liam's
probably
message.
a prank. Maybe
Are
someone
you
got
okay?
my name from a delivery database.
I typed back, trembling.
Still,
Someone's in my
Officer
kitchen.
Jensen promised to have the
Before I
landlord
could finish,
install a camera.
the power went out.
By Monday,
The
it was
apartment
mounted
fell
above
into
my
near
door,
total darkness,
small and blinking
save for the
red.
occasional flash of lightning
I told
outside.
myself that was enough.
The landline
For
rang
a week,
again.
I tried to act normal.
I lifted the receiver,
Work, eat,
hands shaking,
collapse into bed.
I told you to
But
turn
every
the
creak
light
of
off.
the building made
The
me
voice
tense.
whispered.
The
This
woods
time,
that once looked
almost
peaceful,
gentle,
now
as if
felt like a
mocking my
wall
fear.
hiding eyes.
I barely remembered
I kept the
breathing as I
blinds
clutched
closed,
the phone.
left the TV on
The
for
police
background
arrived
noise,
15 minutes later,
and jumped every time
lights
gravel
cutting
popped
across the
beneath a
rain-slick
tire.
street.
Exactly
When
7
they
nights
entered,
later,
everything seemed normal.
Friday,
At first, front door
3:17
locked from
a.m.
the inside.
The alert
No
from the
signs
new
of
camera
struggle.
buzzed my
No
phone.
forced entry.
Half
But
asleep,
the kitchen told
I
a
opened
different
the feed.
story.
He was
The
there.
chain was snapped clean
Same
through,
jacket,
and on
same
the table
cap,
sat a still
no
warm
clipboard this
teacup
time.
and a delivery receipt.
He just stood on my
Timestamped
porch,
11:47
looking
p.m.
straight into the lens.
I read the name
smiling
aloud.
faintly.
Ward,
The timestamp
Elena,
ticked for nearly 2
apartment
minutes
9.
before he turned and walked
The
back into the
officers
trees.
exchanged glances.
When officers
The building
arrived
had
again,
no apartment 9.
he was gone.
I sat on
They
my
dusted
couch,
for prints and
wrapped
found
in a
nothing.
blanket, watching the officers
Could be someone
sweep the
local
apartment.
messing around.
They treated
One
me
said,
with the calm
"We'll keep an
professionalism
eye
I
out."
needed, but their
Messing
faces
around,
betrayed
I packed a
confusion.
go bag that night.
Who could
But
have access
exhaustion
to a
and denial
non-existent
made me
apartment?
stay.
One asked.
I didn't want to run again so
I didn't
soon
know.
after starting over.
I tried to reason it
The
out.
following
A
evenings
prank,
blurred
a
together.
delivery mistake.
Sometimes
Someone
I'd
with
think I
building
heard a
plans
bell,
memorized.
faint and quick.
None of it explained
Sometimes
the voice.
the porch light
The
flickered
landline
brighter
call,
than usual,
the
like
kitchen
someone had
shadow.
brushed against the
The
sensor.
detective encouraged me
My
to write down
coworkers
every
noticed the
detail I could
circles under
remember.
my eyes.
I described the distorted
sure
man
you're
on the
okay,
intercom,
Ann?
the
My
precise
manager
timing,
asked.
the whispering
I lied
voice,
and said
the
yes.
paper bag, and the
One
fact
morning
that the
before
kitchen
work,
light
I
had
found
turned
small
on and off
pebbles lying
seemingly on
neatly
its
along
own.
the window ledge.
I realized
Each
then that
speckled with
apartment
mud, I
9
swept
wasn't
them
just
away without
non-existent
thinking,
on paper,
though the pattern looked
it
too
didn't appear
deliberate to be
anywhere in the
random.
building's blueprints either.
Mid-March brought colder
And yet,
nights and endless rain.
Something had been there.
I started crashing on the couch
That night,
instead of the bedroom.
I barely slept.
It felt closer to the
Every
front
creak
door.
in the building felt
Safer
amplified.
somehow. On
Every
the
distant
18th,
drip of water
after another
a
long
warning.
shift,
I
came
kept
home
checking
to
the
find an
hallway,
envelope
the
stuck
front
under the
door,
doormat.
the kitchen chain,
No address,
the idea
no
that
stamp.
someone or
Inside was a
something
blank piece
could
of paper
exist in a space that
except
didn't
for a
exist
single printed line.
haunted me.
Package rescheduled.
Over the
awaiting
next
your
week,
signature.
I became a
I
ghost
called
in
the
my
police
own home.
again. Officer Jensen
I started
came out,
documenting
patient as
everything.
ever. But what could he do?
Timestamps for noises,
No
shadows,
fingerprints, no
misplaced
witnesses,
objects.
he said.
I
Might be
began
time to
speaking
think
to
about
neighbors
staying with
quietly,
family for a bit.
asking if anyone had seen
That
strange
night I couldn't
deliveries.
bring myself
People
to turn
in the
off the
hall.
lights.
Unusual
I
activity.
watched the camera feed on my
Most
phone
shrugged,
until my eyes
distracted
ached.
by their own lives.
Around 3
A
a.m.
few looked
The
uncomfortable.
motion sensor triggered
One
again.
elderly woman whispered
The
about
porch was empty,
the old service corridor
but the camera
that had been
glitched,
sealed years ago,
flickering to
forgotten
static
by
for 5
management.
seconds.
She
When
said
the image
rumors
returned,
floated that someone
a shadow
occasionally
shifted
moved
near
there,
the tree line,
but no one could
tall
confirm.
and thin.
I
Then it was
decided to
gone.
investigate.
I barely
Cautiously.
worked the next day.
I discovered a
hands
narrow
trembled pouring
service
coffee.
hallway behind a panel
My
in the
boss
basement,
told me to take the weekend
barely
off.
wide enough for a single
I spent
person.
those 2 nights at a
It had
coworker's
old
place
pipes,
across town,
electrical
pretending
conduits,
to sleep on her
and
couch
faded
while
numbers
staring at my
scribbled on the
phone,
wall,
waiting for
including
another alert.
Apartment 9.
None came.
The number was scratched
When I
and
returned
worn.
home Sunday,
almost
the front door
deliberately
lock felt
obscured.
different.
A
Looser,
chill ran down
as
my
if someone
spine.
had tried a key that didn't
Apartment
fit.
9 had
I
existed
cried for the
once.
first time since moving
Someone
to Asheville.
or something
By late March,
had reclaimed it
paranoia
in
had
ways
settled
no one
in like
accounted
mold.
for.
I kept the phone charged
passed.
beside me. The police on speed
Management
dial,
sealed the
a kitchen
service
knife
corridor
under my
permanently.
pillow.
Police
Every sound
investigated my
outside
report,
became a question.
and no one claimed responsibility
Then came
for
the
the
night the
calls or the
doorbell rang
delivery.
again.
I tried to resume normal life,
3:17 a.m.
but my
sharp.
perception of safety had
I
shifted.
froze,
I
staring
became
at the ceiling.
meticulous, checking
The bell
locks,
chimed once,
avoiding leaving lights
then
on
again,
unnecessarily,
longer,
questioning the
identical to the
ordinary
first
I
night I
installed
whispered
extra
to
security
myself,
cameras and
"Don't
alerted
move.
neighbors to irregularities. The building
The
was
bell
the same,
stopped,
yet different.
replaced by knocking.
I had seen that a place
3
could exist
slow,
quietly,
polite taps.
hidden from official
I crept
maps,
to the hallway and peeked
someone
through
could
the
use it to
peephole.
unsettle the ordinary.
No one.
Even today,
My breath
when I
fogged
passed
the
my
glass.
building, my
I
eyes
backed
flicked
away,
toward the basement panels,
then heard footsteps
the doors
retreating
to the
down
sealed
the porch
hallways.
steps. When
The
morning
apartment
came,
that shouldn't exist
I opened the door.
reminded me that the familiar
A
isn't
cardboard
always
box
safe,
sat on the mat.
that our assumptions
No
about
label,
security are fragile.
just my name written in black
Awareness,
marker.
vigilance,
I should have left
and
it,
courage to
but
act
curiosity got
are the
the better of
tools
me.
we actually control.
Inside was a
I
single
still
item,
enjoy evenings at
an
home,
old-fashioned brass
but I leave
doorbell
lights
button,
on,
smeared
doors
with
locked,
mud.
and occasionally
That was it.
I pause before
I
answering
packed everything I
unknown
owned
calls.
into my car before sunrise. sunrise.
The world is ordinary.
I drove straight to my parents' house in Greensboro without calling ahead. My mom
Safety
cried when
isn't
she saw me.
guaranteed by walls,
Dad
locks,
replaced
or
my
routines
phone number
alone.
that night. Said we'd talk to
True
state police
protection
in the
comes
morning.
from vigilance,
For weeks,
awareness,
nothing
and the
happened.
courage to act when the world hides
fear started
secrets
to
in
fade,
familiar places.
replaced by exhaustion.
Ordinary spaces can
Until
conceal
one night in
extraordinary
April,
danger.
at my parents'
and
home,
preparedness
I
is the
woke
only
to my phone
control we
vibrating
truly
on the
hold.
nightstand. The screen flickered once,
then glowed with a notification. Delivery delayed, awaiting your signature. No app name, no sender. Just that I've changed phones 3 times since then, but sometimes, rarely, the screen still flickers at 3:17 a.m. Maybe it's a glitch burned into my paranoia. Maybe not. I never went back to Asheville. The police never found the man.
Long before that night,
The
my life
landlord
was
said the
simple.
apartment stayed empty for
Predictable
months
even.
after I left.
I worked the
Then
evening
finally
shift
rented
at
to a
small
college
cafe
kid.
off
I
Willow
thought about
Creek
warning
Road.
him.
The
But
kind
what
of
would I
place where
say?
locals came more for conversation
There's someone
than
out
coffee.
there who rings the bell at
My world
3:17
revolved around
a.m.
routine.
I've
Wake
tried
up late,
rebuilding a normal
open
life.
the
I
shop
work
at
days
3,
now at a cafe
serve
in
lattes
Greensboro.
to college kids and
Close
retirees,
enough that my parents drop by
close up around
sometimes.
11,
The
and walk
scent of
home
coffee
under the
still
glow of
clings
street
to me,
lamps and moonlight.
but at least it means
It
daylight.
wasn't glamorous, but I liked
Some
it that
nights
way.
I catch
My
myself
cottage
checking the
sat near
locks
edge of
3
town,
times,
tucked
or
behind
listening
a
for
stretch of
gravel
woods that
crunching
most
under
people
invisible
avoided after dark.
footsteps.
The house was old.
My friends
a
joke that
leftover
I'm
from my
jumpy.
grandparents' generation.
They don't know how quiet the
Creaky
woods can
floors,
get when
chipped
someone's
paint,
waiting
and a porch
outside your
that
door.
groaned under the slightest weight.
If there's one thing I've learned,
I lived alone
it's
unless
that
you counted
danger
my
doesn't always
catfinch, who
burst
mostly
through
kept
with
to
noise.
himself. That November night,
Sometimes
the
it
rain
knocks
hadn't stopped
softly and
since
smiles
sunset.
politely,
By
holding
the
a
time I
clipboard.
locked the cafe door,
When I remember
my
that
jeans
face,
clung to my legs,
the
and my umbrella
half-shadowed
had
grin,
lost its battle with the wind.
I wonder if
The
he
walk
ever
home
really
was only
wanted
20
to hurt
minutes,
me,
but it felt like
or
a
if it
mile
was
of
the
cold
chase,
needles on my skin.
the control.
When I finally reached my
Either
porch,
way,
I let out a shaky breath
He
of
took
relief.
something I can't get
The air
back.
smelled like wet pine and earth.
The simple belief
clean,
that
familiar.
home means safety.
I hung my coat.
I'm
changed
writing this
into
now
dry
because
clothes,
part
and
of me
set
needs
water
it
to boil for
recorded.
tea.
Needs the
Finged
memory
me out from
pinned
his
down
perch by
like
the window,
evidence.
tail flicking, eyes fixed
Maybe
outside.
someone else will read
What's
it
wrong,
and listen
buddy?
to that small
I
voice
asked,
that
rubbing his
says,
head. He didn't
something's
move,
not right.
just stared. I brushed it off.
Maybe they'll lock the door
storm
before
was loud.
curiosity wins.
Probably just the sound of
It's
branches hitting
3:16
the
a.m.
siding.
as I finish
I curled
typing.
up on the couch, wrapped
I'm going
in
to
a
turn
blanket,
off
and
my
turned
phone
on the
before
small
it
lamp
decides to
beside
remind me what time it is.
Thunder rumbled in the distance, deep and slow. The rain against the windows
I never thought
almost
I'd
felt
leave Chicago
comforting
for the middle of
until
nowhere.
I heard it.
But there I was,
A sound from the
driving
porch.
down a winding
Slow,
gravel road
deliberate
that
creaks.
disappeared into dense
Wood groaning
pines,
under the weight of
the
something
tires
heavy.
crunching over loose
I
stones.
muted the TV and held
My
my
little
breath.
gray-striped
1,
cat,
2,
Juniper,
3 steps.
curled in her carrier
Then
at my
silence.
feet.
Probably the wind.
I was 29,
whispered to myself, though
broken-hearted,
even saying it out loud didn't
and
make it
desperate
true.
for quiet.
I peeked through the curtain.
A summer in my late
porch light
grandparents'
flickered
old white
once, twice,
farmhouse
and then
seemed
went
like the
dark.
perfect
The
remedy I
yard was
needed:
nothing but
space,
black water and
peace,
shadows.
and maybe
Nobody
a little
there.
distance from my
When
own
the bulb
thoughts.
flickered back to life, I froze.
The farmhouse wasn't
Across
fancy.
the wooden planks of my
White
porch
paint
were
peeling
wet
in
footprints,
places,
large,
windows streaked
bare,
from years of
leading
autumn
toward
rains.
the front door.
But it was
My
mine
heart
for the
climbed
next
into my
3
throat.
months.
I stepped
The
back
orchard
from the window,
behind it,
every nerve in
with
my
trees
body
headed
seemingly
with apples,
alive. I
smelled
locked the
faintly of
deadbolt
earth
and
and
the chain.
decay.
Checked every
The
window.
air was crisp and a
Finch
little
darted
sharp.
under the couch as
A
if
welcome
confirming what
change
I
from the
already
concrete
feared.
and exhaust of the
Something
city.
wasn't
I
right.
spent the drive
And then
imagining
came the
mornings
second
with
sound.
coffee in the sunroom,
A faint scraping from the
evenings
back door.
painting under
It was
soft
soft at
lamplight,
first,
juniper
like someone
purring
dragging
nearby.
something across the glass. Then
For
came
the
a
first
single
few
knock.
weeks, life was
Slow,
idyllic. I
measured.
painted from sunrise to sunset.
That was when the
sending
kettle
prints
screamed,
to my online
startling me
customers,
so hard I almost
cooking
dropped
simple
my phone.
meals, and reading on the
I dialed
porch while the
911 with
cicadas
trembling
hummed in the
fingers.
distance.
The dispatcher's calm
The
voice
only
barely
sounds
cut
besides
through
the
pounding
wind
in
and
my
the cat's
ears.
meows were
Ma'am,
the
stay
occasional
inside.
crunch of a tractor
Officers are
tire
on the
far
way.
off in the valley,
Do not open any
or a
doors.
neighbor's dog barking somewhere
I didn't.
behind the woods.
I stood frozen
The
in the middle
solitude
of
was
my living room,
intoxicating,
eyes darting between
and for the
front
first
and
time
back
in months,
doors.
I
The
felt like
scraping
myself
stopped.
again.
For 10 long minutes, the world was
Then,
nothing but thunder
one
and
night in
silence.
late September,
Then were flashing
things
red and blue
shifted.
lights through the rain.
I was cleaning brushes
when
in
the
the
police
kitchen.
arrived, they found
Juniper
the
draped over
footprints
the
leading off
windowsill
the porch and
when I
into
heard
the
it.
woods.
A
One of
faint
them shone his
clink.
flashlight over the glass near the couch.
Clink.
There, smeared in mud,
Outside,
was a single handprint.
like metal scraping
I didn't
against
sleep
wood.
that night.
My heart
Or
jumped.
the next.
I grabbed a
The next morning,
flashlight and
sunlight
stepped onto
poured
the
weakly
porch,
through the clouds.
swinging the beam
The
across
ground
the
was still
orchard
wet,
and the long gravel
glistening with
driveway.
puddles, but the world seemed
The
too
trees
quiet.
barely moved.
Like the rain had
No
washed
wind.
away all the noise.
No one.
Leaving only unease
I
behind.
muttered to myself,
Two
"It's
officers
probably a
came
loose
back
gate or
around
some
noon
branch."
to take a statement.
I locked the
Officer
door and
Hart,
tried to
tall
return
and
to my
calm-eyed,
peace,
sat at my kitchen table,
though unease crept into
jotting
my
notes
chest.
as I recounted every
The
sound,
next
every
night,
flicker, every
Juniper
detail.
hissed, eyes
You
glowing in
didn't
the
see
dark,
anyone?
staring toward
He
the
asked.
orchard window.
No, I said.
I
Just the
froze,
footprints.
staring at the
Nothing
shadows until my pulse began to race.
Forced entry.
A single
sure all
chain
doors were locked?
swinging from an apple
Yes,
branch
I checked
caught the
twice.
moonlight.
He exchanged a glance
Nothing
with
else
his partner.
moved.
Could have been a
I
drifter.
whispered,
We get some passing
out
through
there?
after storms. Maybe
The
looking
wind
for
was
shelter.
still. The night
That
silent,
explanation made
save
sense.
for the
Too
hum
much
of
sense.
insects.
It was easier to
By the
believe
fourth
in a
night,
harmless
the noises
stranger
had
than
grown
something
familiar.
darker.
Always near
Still,
midnight,
when I looked out at the
always
woods,
the
I
same
couldn't shake the
metallic
feeling
scrape.
that whoever had been there
Then
wasn't
came
just
the
passing
knocks.
through. That
Three
evening, I
soft,
replaced the
deliberate
porch light and
taps on
bought
the
new
back door.
locks. My friend
My hand
Kara
shook
from the
as I
cafe
reached for
dropped
my
by
phone,
with dinner.
debating
"You
whether
okay?"
to call the sheriff.
she asked, setting the takeout
The
bag on
sound
the counter.
stopped as abruptly as
"Yeah,"
it began.
I lied.
By
"Just
morning,
tired."
muddy
She
boot
frowned.
prints encircled the
"You should
porch
stay with
but didn't
someone
lead
for a few
away.
nights." "I'll be
Whoever,
fine."
or whatever,
But the truth was I
had
hadn't
been
been
there
fine
seemed
since
to
that
vanish.
handprint. Every creak in the
Determined to
floorboards,
protect
every
myself,
flicker of shadow
I drove
set my
into
heart
town and
racing.
bought 2 security
Later
cameras.
that night, as I
I
tried
set
to
one near the
sleep, I
back
heard
door
something again.
and another facing the
A
orchard.
faint hum like static.
When
or
the
low
noises
whispering
returned
coming
that
from the
night,
porch.
the cameras recorded
I
only
held my
static,
breath and listened.
as if someone had
It
jammed the
stopped.
signal.
When I finally
My
fell
hands
asleep
trembled
near
as I
dawn,
scrolled
dreamt
through
of
the
footprints
footage,
in the rain,
seeing nothing but
circling the
snow-like
house.
fuzz.
2 days
The
later,
fifth
a man
night
came
arrived
into
with
the
a chill in
cafe
the air.
asking for directions.
I was curled on the
He was
couch,
tall,
a mug of
with a wet
tea warming
jacket
my
and a
hands.
quiet smile that
When I
didn't
heard
reach
it,
his eyes. "Hey,"
the 3
he said
knocks.
to me. "You know where
Heart in
Willow
my
Creek
throat.
Road connects to Old
I
Mill
tiptoed
Lane?"
to the back door.
Something about his
Phone
voice made
clutched
my
in one
stomach
hand,
twist.
flashlight in
Calm.
the other.
Too calm.
And then I heard
"Yeah,"
it.
I said, pointing
whisper.
vaguely toward the north
A
window.
voice low and
About
deliberate,
2 miles down,
coming
then
through
left.
the brass mail
He
slot.
nodded, thanked me, and left.
Rose.
But as he pushed
Open
the door
up.
open, I noticed the
I
mud on his
froze.
boots,
My
dried in
stomach
thick
twisted.
streaks like he'd walked through the
Who
same
is
woods
this?
behind my house.
I whispered.
I told
Voice
Officer Hart
barely
about it
audible.
the next day, but without proof there
response.
wasn't much they could do.
Just shallow breathing.
That night I slept with a
I
flashlight
backed
in my
away
hand.
from the door,
And then
dialing
around 2 a.m. I
911
woke
with
up to the
trembling
sound
fingers.
of rain again, and
The
footsteps.
dispatcher kept me calm.
This time they weren't on the
instructed
porch.
me to stay away
They
from
were inside
windows
the
and
house.
doors, and
The
promised
first thing I
officers
did was
would be
grab
on their
Finch,
way.
who was hissing at the hallway.
Meanwhile,
The second
I
thing
kept
was
an
call
eye on the
911
orchard
again,
through the kitchen window.
whispering so low I could barely hear
Moonlight
myself.
glinted off
"I
something.
think someone's inside,"
A chain,
I said.
swinging
"Stay quiet,
gently in the
ma'am.
breeze.
Officers are on the
By
way."
dawn,
Can
the
you lock
officers had
yourself in a
searched the
room?
property,
I
but
backed
found
into
nothing.
the bedroom,
They
locked the
chalked it
door,
up
and
to
crouched behind
pranksters,
the bed.
or possibly a
The
trespasser
footsteps
who
would
had
flow,
fled.
heavy, deliberate.
I wasn't
Then
convinced.
came the creak of the living room
My hand
floor.
shook as I
A
followed the
pause,
trail
then
of the
another
chain
step.
into the
My
orchard.
phone buzzed. Kara calling.
Under a twisted apple
I
tree,
silenced it
partially
immediately,
covered
afraid
with
the noise would
dew-soaked
give me
grass.
away.
I found a
And then
small gravestone,
silence. The longest
pale,
silence I'd ever known.
fresh, and
I
unsettling.
don't remember how long I waited
The
before
earth around
sirens
it
came
looked
again.
recently disturbed.
When the officers
I
entered,
knelt,
they found the front
brushing
door
away
wide
dirt
open.
with shaking hands.
Muddy prints led halfway across
Carved
the
into
living
the
room,
surface
then
were the
stopped.
letters
No exit trail.
RMC,
No windows broken.
my initials.
No sign of forced entry.
I staggered back,
like he'd vanished
heart
into the
pounding.
air.
The
Hart
officers
looked at
later
me, his
told me
face
there was
pale.
no record of a grave
said
at
you
that
saw
location
someone?
in county
I
files.
heard him.
My
He was
sense
here.
of safety
He
shattered.
nodded slowly,
I
as if
packed
trying
my
to believe
essentials
it.
and spent the
We'll have
next day
someone watch
sleeping
the
in the
area for a
town's
few
inn,
days.
leaving the farmhouse
But
for
nobody
later.
ever came back.
Returning
A month
to the
later,
farmhouse didn't
I
bring
packed up
relief.
what little I owned and left the
I tried to
cottage for good.
rationalize everything.
Kara helped me load
Maybe it was
boxes
someone
into her
playing a
truck.
twisted prank.
You sure about this?
Maybe the house's old
She
pipes
asked.
caused metal chains
Yeah,
in the
I can't
orchard to
stay
sway
here.
in the wind.
I looked once
But the
more at
pattern
porch.
persisted.
The new bulb
Each
still
night the
flickered
chain
faintly,
swayed, the knocking
casting
came,
a weak
and the
light
whisper
over the
returned.
planks. The rain
Sometimes
had
it was
soft
barely
and steady,
audible,
and for a moment
sometimes
I swore I saw
louder.
a faint shape
Always
standing by
my
the tree
name. I
line.
never saw
But
anyone.
when I blinked, it was gone.
The cameras, too,
I
continued
moved
to
into a small
malfunction
apartment
precisely at the
closer to
time the
town.
disturbances
New
occurred.
locks.
It was
New
almost
neighbors.
as if the property
But even
itself
now,
refused to
sometimes at
reveal
night,
the
when the
intruder
rain
I
starts
stopped
to fall,
eating
I
on the
still
porch,
think I hear it.
avoided walking
That
through the
slow, steady
orchard,
creak of
and spent
footsteps
most
on old
evenings
wood.
painting indoors with
And
the
I
blinds
wonder if whoever
closed.
stood on my porch that
I
night
noticed
was ever
juniper
caught,
grew tense
or if
too,
he's still out there,
hissing at
waiting
corners,
for another light to
following the
flicker in
sound of
storm.
unseen
Fear
footsteps
is not
I couldn't
always
sleep.
paranoia. Sometimes
When I
it's your mind
tried,
recognizing
I'd
danger
awaken
before
to the
your logic
softest
catches
creak
up.
of the floorboards,
Never ignore
or the
the
low
small
rattle
signs
of
that
metal
tell you
brushing
something is
against
wrong.
something in the orchard.
Safety isn't just about locks and doors.
One night,
It's about
desperate to
listening
regain
to the
control,
voice inside that
I
whispers.
set up a makeshift
"Leave."
observation post with my laptop, monitoring the cameras for hours. The feed cut out repeatedly. Static,
You never
glitches,
think the night's going to change your
interruptions.
life until it does.
Then came the
It was late
whisper.
August, that heavy part of summer
It was
when the air
close
feels
now.
like a damp towel
Outside
over
the
your
kitchen
face.
window,
I just
barely
finished
a
the
breath.
closing shift at Redwood Diner.
Rose,
The kind of small town
We're
place that
watching.
smells like coffee and bacon no
I
matter the
collapsed
hour.
on the floor.
My name's
laptop
Akan
abandoned,
Sophia Allenra,
my chest
26 years
heaving.
old, still
I
living in
whispered
the
to
same
myself,
Kentucky county I'd been born
I have
in.
to leave.
That night I'd stayed an extra
By
hour to help
mid-October,
restock the walk-in
the
fridge.
fear had become unbearable.
Carol, my my manager was down
Every
with a
sound
summer
triggered
cold and needed all
adrenaline.
the help she could get.
The whispering, the
By the
knocking,
time I wiped down the last
chain
table
swinging,
and killed the neon
it
sign,
felt deliberate,
it was close to midnight.
personalized.
The world outside felt
Whoever,
hollowed out.
or
Just
whatever,
the buzz of insects,
was
the
doing
hum of
this
the
knew my
highway far
habits,
off, and
my
that faint
schedule,
metallic taste
even
in
my
the air
name.
right before rain.
I began locking
My
every
route
door
home
and
was
window,
second nature.
but even that
Cut
didn't
down to
help.
Ridge Road.
One
Take the
evening,
curve past the post
I
office
swore
and
I saw
follow
a
the back
shadow
road
slip
along
between
the
the
tree line
trees at the
until I
orchard's
hit
edge.
Maple Hollow.
I grabbed a
where my little
flashlight,
house
stormed
waited.
outside, but the
No
yard was
streetlights.
empty.
No
Only the
cameras.
old apple trees
Just
swayed
darkness
gently,
and the steady beam
silent
of my
witnesses
headlights
to my
carving
panic.
through it.
Then came
I
the
was humming
gravestone
along
again.
to an old song on the
By
radio when
moonlight,
my engine
I
coughed.
noticed a second one,
Once,
smaller,
twice,
half buried,
then
etched
the
with
power
my name.
died like somebody
My
had
mind
pulled a
spun.
plug.
Who is
The
doing
dashboard
this?
lights dimmed.
Why me?
And the car coasted to a stop
I
beside a
wanted
stretch of
answers,
overgrown mailboxes.
but I didn't want to be outside long
Come on,
enough
I
to
muttered,
find them.
turning the key again.
I
Click,
called
click.
the local sheriff again,
Nothing.
but officers
It was the
found
kind
nothing.
of silence that makes you
The
aware of
land
your
was
own
too remote
heartbeat.
for cameras to capture
I
everything.
pulled my phone out of my
and
bag.
the intruder
no
left
signal.
no fingerprints.
I lifted
no
it toward
evidence.
the windshield. Still nothing.
My sense of reality fractured.
I told
questioned
myself
my
I'd
sanity.
wait a few minutes.
Yet every
Cars
time I
pass
passed
this
the
road
orchard,
sometimes.
the chain
Mostly
swayed
locals
as
heading
if to
home from
remind me
late
that it
shifts
wasn't
like mine.
imagination.
But 15 minutes
I moved
went
out of
by
the
and not a
farmhouse
single
the
pair of
following week,
headlights appeared.
leaving half-finished
Then from
paintings,
behind me I saw
canvases,
them.
and art
Two
supplies
circles
behind.
of yellow light growing
The old
larger.
house had offered me
A truck
solitude
moving
and
slow.
inspiration,
Relief flooded
but
me,
it had
though
also
part of
shown
me
me
stayed
that some
tight in the chest.
unknowns are better left
The
alone.
pickup pulled alongside my car.
Neighbors later
Engine
told me that
rumbling
winter
deep and
storms
uneven.
felled the apple
The driver
tree
rolled
nearest
down
the
his window.
grave.
A man in
Roots
his 50s
curling
maybe,
around
with
the
a
buried
sun-creased
chain.
face and the easy drawl
No
of someone used
explanation
to
ever came
strangers.
for who carved my initials,
You all right there,
who
miss?
left the gravestones,
He called out.
or why the chain
I think
moved
so,
when
I
no
said,
wind
forcing
blew.
a smile.
The
Car
cameras
died on
remained
me.
silent on
I'm trying
footage,
to get a tow, but
even as the
no service,
disturbances
and he nodded.
continued.
Figures.
Years
These
later,
roads will
I
trap a
still
signal
dream of that
faster than
orchard.
they
I
trap
sometimes
heat.
catch
I got a
myself
shop
waking
not far
at
from
3
here if you
a.m.,
want. Could tow you
imagining
up there and take
footsteps
a look.
crunching on the gravel,
The way he said
whispers
it,
just
too
beyond
easy,
the blinds.
too practiced, made something
I've never
shift inside
returned,
me.
and I don't
couldn't
plan
explain
to.
it, but his tone felt rehearsed.
But the experience
I
taught me
appreciate
something
it,
important.
I said carefully, but I've got
Some
family
things in
nearby.
life defy
They'll
reason,
come get me.
but they demand
He leaned
respect.
a little out of the window, peering at the
Curiosity
empty
is
road.
human,
Family
but
out here?
intuition is survival.
Yeah, I lied.
When
A pause
something
stretched
feels
between
wrong,
us.
trust
Then he
it.
smiled, small,
And sometimes,
polite, the kind of
leaving
smile
is the
that
only
doesn't
way to
reach the
protect
eyes.
what's left of yourself.
All right then.
When your
You take
intuition
care.
signals
He
danger,
drove off
don't
slowly,
ignore
tires
it.
crunching gravel.
Curiosity
I watched
can be
until the
valuable,
red glow of his
but
tail lights
personal
vanished
safety
around the
must
bend.
come first.
I exhaled.
Some mysteries,
My hands
no
were
matter how
trembling, but I
tempting,
laughed under
are
my
not
breath.
worth solving.
See, Sophia?
Leaving is
Not every
sometimes the
stranger's a
bravest
killer.
choice.
That's what I told myself, until I saw the headlights again.
I used
The
to
same
love
truck.
the quiet of our little
Same yellow
semi-detached
lights.
house on Laurel Row.
At first, I thought
34
maybe
years
he
old,
realized I needed real
6-year-old
help
daughter
and turned
Emily,
around.
and a husband Ryan,
But the longer he
who
sat
worked the
there,
night shift across
engine
town.
idling, lights trained on the back
Most
of my car,
evenings,
the faster my
it was
pulse
just the
kicked.
two of us.
Okay, I
I'd tuck
whispered,
Emily
no
into
panic,
bed,
just think.
settle in with
I
a
locked
cup
the
of
doors.
tea, and let
My
the hum
fingers
of the
brushed the
radiator
keys
lull
still
us
in the
both to
ignition, but
sleep.
starting the car wasn't an
That was
option.
normal.
The battery
That was safe.
gone. The
Until
truck
it
door
wasn't.
creaked open. I froze. Through
Emily
the
had
rearview
been
mirror, I
restless
saw a
lately.
shape. Tall,
She refused to sleep
broad-shouldered,
alone,
step out into
claiming
the glow
someone
of the
whispered
headlights.
to her through the wall.
He didn't call out
I
this time.
smiled, brushing
Didn't
off
wave.
her imagination.
Just stood there staring
Kids
toward my
conjure
car.
up the oddest
I grabbed my
fears.
phone again, still no service.
He talks to me again,
My
Mummy.
breath hitched, and
She
I knew
whispered
sitting
one
there was the
evening,
worst thing I could
clutching
do.
Mr. Cuddles, her stuffed
I remembered
bear.
my dad teaching me to drive
Who,
when I
love?
was 16.
I asked, trying to sound
If something
reassuring.
feels wrong, trust it,
The
he'd
grandpa
said.
next door.
The road will
He
always
whispers
be
through
there.
the vent.
You just get yourself
says he
out
can
first.
see me.
So I did. I pushed the
I
door
felt
open
my chest
quietly,
tighten, but
grabbed my
forced a
bag and
laugh.
slipped into the darkness.
Mr. Henley was
The
old,
tall grass brushed my jeans
reclusive,
as I ran toward
harmless.
the woods. Behind
Or
me
so
came
I
a shout,
thought.
faint but sharp.
I'd only
Hey,
met
you don't
him
have to
once.
run. I didn't
He
look
mumbled
back.
about rubbish bins
My
and
sneakers
shuffled
pounded the
away,
dirt shoulder,
eyes
my breath
downcast,
coming in gasps.
a lonely
I
figure
hit the tree
behind his
line and ducked
frosted
between the
window.
trunks, pulling out my phone again.
Still,
One bar,
Emily
thank
was my
God.
child.
I dialed 911.
If she
the
was
dispatcher
scared,
answered on the
I
second
had to
ring.
listen.
911, what's your emergency?
That night,
My car
long
broke
after
down, I
Emily had
panted.
dozed off, curled
There's a
under
man.
her blanket.
He followed me. I think
heard
he's still
it.
out there. Please
It
send
was
someone.
soft.
Stay on the line,
Tap,
ma'am.
tap, tap.
Can you describe your
From the
location?
wall beside her bed.
Somewhere off Ridge Road near the
My
turn
heart
for Maple
jumped.
Hollow, I said, voice shaking.
Tap.
The dispatcher's
Pause.
tone stayed steady.
Tap,
We've
tap.
got units on the way. Stay
I
hidden, stay
froze.
quiet.
Every
I
nerve
crouched
alert.
behind a fallen log,
It
phone
was too
pressed to my
rhythmic
ear,
to be a
trying to
settling
listen
house.
for movement.
Too
I could hear
precise for a
twigs
loose
snapping in
shutter
the
or the
dark,
wind.
slow
I
and
pressed my
deliberate.
ear to the plaster.
10 minutes stretched like an hour.
Hello?
Then I saw flashing
I
red
whispered.
and blue through the trees. The man's
Silence.
truck lights flickered once, then
Sleep
went dark.
eluded me.
When the officers reached
Every
me, I could
creak in
barely
the
speak.
floor sounded
One of
deliberate.
them, Officer Hale, shined
Every
a
groan
flashlight
of the
down the
house
road.
felt like a message.
My
I
car
told myself
sat where
it
I'd
was
left
nothing,
it, engine still running.
but I didn't feel safe
Driver's
anymore.
door open. They
The
found
next morning,
footprints, his
I
mine,
couldn't
both
ignore it.
leading toward the woods.
I unscrewed the air
His
vent in
print
Emily's
stopped
room,
halfway in.
expecting
expecting maybe
The
a
rest
mouse or a
disappeared
bird
into
had found
nothing.
its way inside.
They never found him.
What I
For a
found
week, I
instead
couldn't
made my stomach lurch.
Every sound outside my
A
window,
tiny
every
hole
passing car
drilled
made my
straight through the
stomach
bent
twist.
metal.
The police
perfectly
came back
aligned
twice to
toward the
take
neighbor's
follow-up
flat.
statements.
My
They were
fingers shook
kind,
as I
but I could
traced
tell
it.
they didn't expect to find
Someone
him.
had been looking through
They
here.
said he was likely a drifter.
I called Ryan immediately.
Maybe someone looking for trouble who got
Something's
scared
not
off
right,
when I ran.
I said.
But
The
something
vent,
about
someone's
it
been
stuck
looking
my
in
head.
Emily's room.
The way he'd said, I got a
Clara,
shot
love,
nearby.
call the police
The
right
way
now.
he'd looked past me
He
and not
replied,
at me.
his voice
Like he was
sharp.
scanning for something else.
Officers
My mom wanted
arrived
me to
within
stay
minutes.
with her for a while.
They were calm,
I did.
professional.
Her house was small,
but I could see the
warm,
gravity in their
filled
eyes.
with the smell of cinnamon candles.
One of them
and
unscrewed
safety.
a loose outlet cover
But even
behind
there,
Emily's bed and
I
found
couldn't
another
shake
hole,
the feeling that someone had
perfectly
seen me,
drilled.
picked picked
pointing
me out
in
of
the
the
same
dark like I
direction.
was meant to be on that road.
They used
that
a fiber
night.
camera
At
to peer
work, people
through it.
tried to act normal.
My chest
Carol
tightened as
hugged
I
me when I
imagined
came
someone
back and
watching
said,
my
"You're
daughter
lucky,
sleep,
Sophia.
recording,
Most people don't get a
noting,
warning like that."
waiting.
Lucky.
When they had a
I heard
warrant,
that word a lot.
they searched Mr.
Still,
Henley's
the nightmares
flat.
came. The
Beneath
sound
his
of gravel
quiet
under
exterior
boots.
was a dark,
The sight of
meticulous
those headlights
obsession.
burning holes in the dark.
Electronics,
A detective
hidden
called me
cameras,
2 weeks later.
a live
They'd found
feed
tire
pointed
marks
directly
near an
into
abandoned
Emily's
property
room.
off Ridge Road, but
Photos
nothing
of
else.
neighborhood
No
children
license
lined
plate,
his
no
shelves.
trace. Sometimes
Equipment
they
for
just move
recording
on,
and
he
observing,
said gently.
all concealed
It's
behind
not personal.
ordinary furniture and
But
bland
it had felt
walls.
personal. It
When
still
they
did.
handcuffed him,
A month
Mr.
later,
Henley
I moved.
glanced at me with a
New
faint
place,
smile.
new route to work. I
You
told
should have
myself
kept the
it was
light
time to
off.
stop living scared.
It's easier to see in the dark.
It was late September when I first
That
heard the
smile
knock.
will haunt me forever.
Soft, rhythmic. I
Even
was
after
home
he was
alone.
arrested,
My
sleep
roommate had
didn't
gone to her
return
boyfriend's
easily.
place.
I
The
taped
clock read
vents,
11:47
covered
and I
outlets,
froze, every
and
muscle
double-checked
locking in
locks
place.
multiple
The knock
times a
came
night.
again. 3 times.
Emily started
I
sleeping in
tiptoed
her
to the
bed
people.
again,
No one.
but only with the
Just
hall lights
darkness and
spilling
the
through
faint
the
glimmer
doorway.
of porch light catching on wet pavement.
The house,
I
once
waited.
comforting,
Nothing. Maybe
felt
kids,
like
I
a
thought.
trap.
Maybe nothing at all.
Every creak,
But when
every
I
whisper
opened the
of the
door the
wind
next
through the
morning, there
vents
were footprints,
made me
large,
jump.
mud-caked, leading from the
I walked the
driveway to
rooms
my door and
repeatedly
back
at night,
again.
checking
I
the
called
walls,
the police.
tracing
They
the
checked
edges
the
of
area,
electrical fittings,
said the prints had been
scanning
washed
every
out by
corner
rain
for another
before they
hole.
could cast them.
Ryan tried
Could
to
be
comfort
anyone,
me.
one of them said.
It's
But I
over,
knew the
Clara.
truth.
He's
The
gone.
shape of the boot tread
You're
looked the
safe.
same as the prints by my car
I
that
nodded,
night.
grateful
After
for his
that, I
calm,
stopped walking alone.
but part of me knew the
I parked
memory would
closer
never
to the
fully
diner.
leave.
I carried
The
pepper
thought
spray
that a
everywhere.
stranger could live so
But more than
close and watch
anything,
my
I started
daughter,
watching people.
our family,
Their tone, their
made
eyes,
me
their patterns.
hyper-aware.
Years have passed
We
since
began
that
slowly
night,
restoring
and I still
normalcy.
think about it every time I drive
Lights
home
on at
after
night,
dark. They
motion
never found the
sensors
man or
installed,
the truck.
cameras
Maybe he's out
pointed
there
at the
somewhere, maybe
entryways.
not.
I kept
But
journals of
sometimes
every
I catch
strange
my
noise,
reflection in the rearview
every
mirror and
sensation that
realize
seemed
something
out of
changed
place.
in me that night.
Control became
I
my
don't
weapon
scare easy
against
anymore,
fear.
but I don't trust easy
Weeks
either.
turned into
I
months.
learned to listen to that
The police
quiet
handled
voice
Mr.
inside,
Henley's
the
case.
one that tells you
The evidence
this
piled
isn't
up,
right.
and he was
You
sentenced
don't
to
argue
years
with it.
behind bars.
You don't explain
But the
it away.
emotional weight
You
didn't
just go.
disappear.
Because I'm
I still
alive,
caught
because
myself
I ran.
glancing at the vents, listening for
Every
tapping,
so often I'll
even
drive
in the
past that
daylight.
same stretch of ridge road.
Emily
The
sometimes
grass is
asked,
taller now. The
"Mommy,
mailbox is rusted.
he's not there anymore,
My old
right?"
car is long gone,
I
replaced
would
by
nod,
something newer,
forcing a
steadier.
smile.
But when the
But my
wind
eyes
picks up
drifted
through
to
those
that wall,
trees, it sounds like
painted over,
footsteps.
patched,
And I can still see those
silent.
headlights in my mind, staring,
How many
waiting.
nights had she been watched
I don't
without our
hate that
knowledge?
memory anymore.
How
It
easily
reminds me
someone
that
could
fear
hide behind
sometimes is
ordinary
just
walls,
instinct trying to save your
blending
life.
in with the
No
mundane.
matter how polite the danger looks,
Every time
no matter
the
how
wind
rattled
rattled
the
the
moment
house or a
feels,
shadow fell
when
strangely
something deep
across the
inside you
floor,
whispers, "Run."
my stomach
Listen.
twisted.
Safety isn't
I
about
had learned
being
a hard
fearless.
lesson about
It's
trust,
about respecting
safety,
the fear
and
that's
vigilance.
trying to keep you alive.
The world looked the same, but I could no longer treat it as if I were fully safe inside it. Even friends' houses, even familiar places,
It was nearly 2
carried
a.m.
new
when I
caution.
left Rick's place.
I
The air
realized how
outside
fragile
colder
our
than I
illusions of
expected.
security can
We'd
be.
spent the evening fixing
It's
the
not
old
that I
fence
lived in
behind his
constant
barn,
terror.
then fell into
It's
the
that
couch
awareness
for a late
became
night
permanent.
football game and a
A
couple
small,
of beers.
necessary
My
prize
hands
for the
still
safety
smelled
of my
like cedar and
daughter.
engine oil. A reminder that
eventually
I promised
found a
myself
rhythm
this
again.
would be an early night, and
Emily's laughter
as usual,
returned,
broke
brighter than
that
before,
promise.
filling the
Rick
corners
lived
of our
out
home.
past the county line.
Ryan's
and my
shifts
route home took me
continued.
through a stretch
Our
of rural
routines became
Kentucky road
comforting.
that cut through miles of farmland.
But I never forgot the
Black
feeling of a
fields on either
stranger's
side.
eyes through the wall.
Endless barbed wire
The
fences,
invasion
no
of
streetlights
privacy,
for 10
so
miles at a
intimate
time.
and invasive,
The only
it
sound was the
reshaped
hum
my
of my
perception
old
of
Ford's
home.
engine and the rhythmic slap of
I began
gravel
teaching
against the
Emily about
undercarriage.
safety in subtle ways.
I remember thinking how
to
peaceful
lock
it
doors,
felt. The kind of
recognize
quiet you
signs
don't
of
get in the
danger,
city.
trust
Just
her
me, the
instincts,
road, and a sky full of stars
not
so
to
clear
scare
you could
her,
almost reach out and
but
grab
to
them.
empower her.
My headlights swept over a possum
And I
crossing.
taught myself the
a
same
mailbox
lessons,
leaning sideways,
reinforcing
a sign half
boundaries and
rusted that
vigilance
read,
without
"Barton
letting fear
Hollow,
consume my daily
7
life.
miles.
The moral became clear.
That was when I saw the lights.
Security is fragile.
Two dim, pulsing red
Danger
dots
isn't
ahead,
always obvious,
like the hazard blinkers
and threats
of a
can
stranded
hide
car.
in plain sight.
They looked small at first, distant,
Walls,
harmless.
doors, and locks
But
are
as I
only
drew
part
closer,
of the protection.
They painted the road in
Awareness,
flashes of red
preparedness,
alertness
and shadow.
and respect for potential
Breaking the
risk are
stillness
just as
that had settled
vital.
over me. At first,
Home
my
is
brain
meant to
ran
be
on
safe,
autopilot.
but
Someone might
safety
be stuck.
requires action,
Maybe hit a deer.
observation,
You stopped to help. That's
and the
what decent
willingness to
people do out here.
recognize that
So
even
I slowed
familiar
down,
spaces can harbor
rolled
danger.
my window down halfway and leaned
Now,
toward the glass. A
when I
silver
tuck
sedan
Emily
sat
in,
half in a
I
ditch,
double-check
its
the
nose
vents,
buried in mud,
glance at the
steam curling
walls,
from the hood.
and take a
A
deep
woman
breath,
stepped into my headlights,
knowing the
waving
past has
frantically.
left its mark.
She wore a heavy coat, hair
We
tangled,
live in the
face
same
pale
house,
and desperate.
under the same
Hey,
roof,
please,
yet
can
the
you
lessons
stop?
remain.
She shouted.
Vigilance,
My husband's hurt.
awareness,
I don't
and the
have a
courage
phone.
to protect those
I
we
put
love,
the truck in park and leaned
even
out.
when the world feels
You okay,
deceptively
ma'am?
ordinary.
What happened?
Safety
came
is never
closer, her
guaranteed by
breath clouding
walls,
in the
doors,
cold.
or locks alone.
We swerved to miss a deer.
True
He's
protection
still
comes from
inside.
vigilance,
Please, I can't move him.
awareness, and the
Something in her
courage
voice
to
made
act
me
when
hesitate.
danger hides in
Not
plain
fear
sight.
exactly, more like strain.
We must respect the
Like she was
fragility
saying
of
what
what
she
we
thought she
consider
should
secure,
say.
and teach both
glanced toward the
ourselves and
ditch,
our
but
children
couldn't see anyone in
to
the driver's
navigate the
seat.
world with caution
Just an
and
empty shape
mindfulness.
behind the fogged windshield. That was when I heard it, a crunch of gravel behind me.
I'd never been alone in
I
our
looked
house
into
on
the
Cedar
rearview
Avenue
mirror.
for this long.
A shape was crouched
My
low near my
parents,
tailgate.
both nurses,
A man's
had gone
face half
downtown
covered
for a
in dirt.
hospital fundraiser,
Eyes locked on
promising
mine
to be
through the
home before
reflection.
midnight, and I had the
My
place to
stomach
myself
dropped.
for the first time
The
in
woman
months.
saw me look. Her
17
expression
years
changed
old,
instantly.
alone,
Panic,
and
not at
bored
me,
stiff.
but for me.
At least that's
Don't
what I
get
told
out,
myself.
she said sharply, her tone
I made
snapping
popcorn,
like a whip.
curled up on the
It
couch,
wasn't a plea.
and cued a
It was a
romantic
warning.
comedy, grateful
Every
for the
instinct
rare
screamed at
stillness.
me. I slammed the
apartment
gear
was
into drive
modest,
and floored it.
the kind that
My
smelled
tires
faintly
spun,
of pine
throwing
cleaner
mud
and
before
old
catching
carpet.
traction.
But I loved
shot
it because
forward,
it felt
swerving
mine,
around her as the man
even if
lunged
just
toward
for
the
a few
door
hours.
handle. His hand smacked
Outside,
the
the
glass,
street was
leaving a
quiet.
print in the dew.
The Hanlons
truck
lived next
fishtailed
door,
hard before
but for
straightening
once,
out.
they weren't
In my
throwing a
mirror,
party.
I saw the woman
That
sprint
fact
into the
alone
dark
made me
field, her
appreciate
voice
the
cutting through
stillness
the night,
even
but I
more.
couldn't make out the words.
Halfway through
Then
my
they were
movie,
gone.
a
The
sharp
ditch, the car,
crash
the blinking lights
cut through
swallowed
the
by
quiet.
distance. I
My
didn't
heart
slow down
skipped a
until I
beat.
hit the county highway 10
Glass.
miles later.
Somebody broke
My
something.
heart pounded so hard I
I
could barely
froze,
breathe.
staring at
I
the
told
wall
myself I'd
separating
go
our
straight to the
duplex.
police station in Lexington.
There it was again.
That I wouldn't even go
Muffled
home
voices,
first.
angry
But when I
and
pulled
low,
into the lot, hands
slamming
trembling,
against
the
each
story
other like a
sounded
storm
insane even
trapped
in my
behind
head.
drywall.
Still, I reported it.
I muted the
They
TV,
took notes,
straining
promised
to
to
hear
check it
another
out.
crash.
I drove home watching my
then
mirrors
silence.
the whole way.
I
That night I
tiptoed to the
didn't
window,
sleep.
parting
Every
the
time I
blinds
closed
just
my
enough
eyes,
to
I
see
saw
the
that
narrow
woman's
driveway.
face. How quickly
Two
fear
hooded
had turned
figures
into
slipped
warning.
into the shadows, moving fast.
The next morning, my phone
One
rang
carried
at
a bag that
8:17.
swung heavily from their
It was
shoulders.
Deputy Collins from the sheriff's
My
office.
fingers tightened around my phone.
Mr. Mason,
My
we
pulse
went out
was a
there
drum
first
beat
thing.
in my ears.
You weren't imagining things.
Then I smelled it.
My heart thudded. What did
Smoke.
you find? He sighed.
Thin at
Tire
first,
tracks, footprints,
curling
broken
under the
taillight.
baseboard.
Couple of spots
But in
in the field
seconds
were
it
having
thickened,
forensics
brushing
dig up.
against my
Looks like
ankles with a
graves, shallow
suffocating
ones.
heat.
Graves. The word hit
Oh
like a
my
hammer.
God.
Any sign of the
I
car?
whispered.
None.
Choking, I
No
grabbed my
debris, no
jacket,
plates,
keys,
nothing.
and phone,
But the
and
soil's
bolted for the
fresh.
front door.
You did good calling it
Behind
in.
me, something popped.
I spent
A
the rest
low,
of that
heavy
day
sound,
trying to shake it
and
off,
then a
but it
flash
clung
of
to me.
orange filled the
Every
cracks of the
errand felt
wall.
hollow. At the
Outside,
grocery store, the
the
hum of
cold
the
hit me
freezer
like a
aisle made me
slap.
flinch.
I could hear the
At the gas
sirens
station,
before I
the
even
sight
saw
of
the
a silver
fire
sedan
trucks,
made my
red and
stomach
blue
twist.
lights painting the
That
street in
evening, Rick
alarm.
stopped by after
A
hearing about it from
firefighter
his
held me
brother,
back,
who worked in
asking
dispatch.
questions I couldn't answer fast
Hell,
enough.
Dan, you could have been another
There's
name
nobody
on the
else
news, he
inside,
said,
right?
setting
I
a
cried.
six-pack on my counter.
They
They're
assured
saying
me
it's
the
the same
Hanlon
stretch
side
where
was
folks have
empty.
gone missing before.
My chest
Before?
was still hammering.
He nodded
My
grimly.
stomach felt hollow.
3 last year.
Hours
Travelers
later,
mostly.
wrapped in a
Cops figured
foil
accidents
blanket,
or people
I
just
overheard
taking
an
off.
officer
Guess
speaking to
not.
my parents.
We sat in silence for a
Third
long
incident
minute.
tied to
The beer
that address
tasted like
this
metal.
year.
I
He
keep
said
thinking
quietly.
about her, I said finally.
My mother's
The
face
woman.
turned pale.
She told me not to get out.
A message?
She shaved me.
She asked.
Rick leaned back, eyes
Not
narrowed.
your daughter.
You sure she
He
wasn't part of
replied.
it?
Wrong wall.
wanted to say yes.
Wrong family.
But the truth was,
But
I
it
didn't
could have
know.
been worse.
That night, sleep came in fits.
I sat on the
Every
curb,
creak of the
shivering,
house sounded like
and tried to
footsteps.
process what had just
Around
happened.
3 a.m., I woke to
The
a car
fire
slowing
trucks had
outside.
left, but the
Headlights
smell
crawled
of
across
burnt
my wall
wood
and
lingered
stopped.
like an oppressive
I held
fog.
my breath. After a
I
long
glanced
moment,
across
the
the
engine
narrow
revved and
space
faded
separating
into
our
the
homes.
distance. When
The
morning
Hanlon
came, I
side
found
was
fresh
just
tire
charred
marks at the
beams
edge of
now,
my driveway.
blackened and
2 days
skeletal.
later, I drove back to Barton
Between
Hollow.
the driveways,
Maybe it was curiosity,
I noticed
maybe
boot
guilt.
prints in the
I needed
frost.
to see the place in
Only
daylight.
one set.
The police tape fluttered
They
weakly
lit
in
up
the
close
wind,
to my window
marking
and
a
then
patch
stopped,
of churned dirt
like whoever
near the
had
field.
done this had paused to
I stood
consider
there
their
for a
work.
while, the silence thick.
That night,
Birds had returned
my
to the
parents
fence
refused
posts,
to let me
oblivious
sleep
to what
alone.
the ground hid beneath them.
I lay in bed listening
That's
to
when
the
I
faint
noticed the
hum of
woman.
the city outside.
She was standing by the
Every
tree line
creak of
about
the
50
house
yards away,
amplified in my mind.
wearing the same heavy coat.
I kept
My
imagining
chest
those
seized.
hooded
Hey!
figures.
I
How
called,
easily
stepping
they
toward
could
her.
have mistaken
She
our
didn't
side
move.
for theirs.
The wind stirred
And the
her hair across
terrifying
her
truth
face.
that danger doesn't
Are you
always
okay?
come from the street.
Are you hurt?
It sometimes
Still nothing.
lives just just a few
Then
inches
she
away.
turned. Not fast, not
The
slow,
next
just
morning,
deliberate.
the sun
And she
glinted
smiled.
weakly off frost-covered
It wasn't
roofs,
the look of someone
but
relieved
the
to be
warmth didn't
found.
reach me.
It was
My
knowing.
parents tried to reassure
I
me,
blinked and she
while
was
insurance
gone.
inspectors
I ran
poked
to
through
where
the
she'd
rubble
been
next
standing.
door. But
Only
I couldn't
footprints
shake the
faint
image
leading
of the
into the
figure
trees,
slipping
then
through the
gone.
dark.
Driving
The
home,
way the
my mind
flames had
spiraled
swallowed
between
the
logic
Hanlon's
and
home
dread.
like it was
Maybe
nothing.
trauma had my imagination
I'm going to
running
check
wild.
on the place.
Maybe she'd been real.
I told my mother.
Maybe she wanted to warn
She shook
me
her
again.
head.
That night, someone
You've
knocked
had
on my
enough
door.
for one night, Josie.
It was Deputy Collins.
Stay here.
Evening, Mr. Mason. Mind if
But
I
I
come
had
in?
to see it for myself.
He held a manila folder.
I stepped
Inside were
gingerly
photos,
along
crime
the
scene
sidewalk,
shots, evidence
crunching
bags.
frozen
We
leaves
dug up 3
underfoot.
sites. 2
The
sets of remains
duplex's
so
other
far.
half was
One's recent,
unrecognizable.
female mid-30s.
Smoke-stained,
The other's
black
older.
beams
Still running
leaning
IDs.
like broken
swallowed
teeth.
hard. The
I
woman
crouched
saw, he
to
nodded.
look closer.
We think she might have
Someone
been
had
one
left
of
the
them.
door unlocked,
probably in the
Weeks
chaos
passed,
of
but I couldn't
evacuation.
shake the feeling that something
And
from
that was when I
road had
noticed
followed
it.
me home.
A pair
My
of black
dreams were
gloves,
filled with
slightly
headlights, flashing
singed,
red lights
lying
through
near
the
the
doorway.
gravel.
I stopped
Whoever had
driving
been
at night
here had
altogether.
taken risks I couldn't
One
imagine.
afternoon, I came home from work and
Back
found my
inside,
front door ajar.
I kept glancing at
My
the wall
first thought was
separating our
burglary,
homes.
but nothing was taken.
I could almost hear the
Instead,
faint
there
echoes
was a
of last
folded
night.
note on the kitchen
The
counter.
crash, the shouting.
It read,
I wondered if anyone
"Thank
was
you for
listening
not
now.
stopping.
If
No
the people
signature.
responsible had
No
lingered
explanation."
nearby,
I
planning
called
another
Collins
hit.
immediately. He
Fear
brought a team
gnawed
to
at the
dust
edges
for
of my
prints not
mind.
found.
Every
"You sure
shadow
you
looked
locked up?" he
taller.
asked.
Every
I
creak
always lock
sounded
up.
deliberate.
Then whoever
By
left this knew
afternoon,
how to get in
the
without
city had
breaking
sent
in.
fire
Maybe
inspectors and
someone
police
you know.
again,
The thought made me
asking
sick.
questions I
For
didn't have
days,
answers
I carried
for.
the note in my wallet.
Did you see
Like
anyone
proof that the
suspicious?
nightmare was still
Any
real.
cars parked
Rick
nearby?
told me to get cameras installed,
Anything at all?
but even that didn't help.
I described
The
the
cameras
hooded
caught
figures,
nothing.
the bag,
Just the
the
wind,
single set
stray
of boot
dogs, and
prints.
my own reflection coming
They took
home late.
notes and promised to keep watch.
Then one night I
but
saw her
promises
again.
in situations
This
like
time
this
in my backyard
felt
by the
thin.
edge of the woods.
That night I stayed
Same
on the
coat, same
couch,
pale face.
lights on,
She didn't
phone
move.
in hand.
Didn't speak.
Every sound,
Just raised a hand
wind
slowly
rattling
as if
against the
pointing behind
siding,
me.
a
I
distant
spun
dog
around.
barking, set me
Nothing
on
there.
edge.
When I turned
My
back,
parents
she
tried
was
to
gone
watch
again.
TV to distract
I started
themselves,
sleeping with
but
the
I couldn't
lights on.
focus.
A month
I
later,
imagined
the
the
sheriff's
intruders
office
across
called.
the street,
They'd
walking the line
identified the
between
bodies.
homes.
One was
maybe
a woman
even
named
watching.
Ellen Price, missing
I
3
wanted to
months.
believe it had been a mistake,
Married to a
a
man named
one-off.
George Price.
But deep down,
He was a
I
suspect
knew it wasn't
in her
random.
disappearance, but he'd vanished too.
Someone wanted to
The name
scare
hit
the
me like a
Hanlons,
bullet.
and
I'd
we had
seen
been
that
unlucky
name
enough to
before,
be in the wrong
on
place
an old mailbox along Route
the wrong
14, a
time.
half-mile from where the wreck had been
Days
staged.
passed,
That
and
night,
the
I
fire
couldn't stay
became a
in the
local
house.
story.
I got in my truck and drove.
News crews
The
came,
road stretched ahead,
interviews were
empty as ever.
conducted,
The
and
same
neighbors
darkness
whispered
pressing
behind
in.
curtains.
When I reached the turnoff to
I
Barton
kept noticing
Hollow, I
small
slowed.
things.
The ditch was
The
overgrown
faint
now.
smell of smoke
No
that
tape,
lingered
no
in the
signs.
hallway.
Just quiet.
The subtle dents in the
For a
walls
moment,
where
I thought I
soot
saw
had settled.
movement, a flicker of red in
Each
the
time
distance.
I heard movement in the
But it was
duplex,
just my own brake
my
lights
stomach
reflecting
lurched.
off a road sign.
One
I
afternoon,
sat
the
there with
police
the engine
knocked
idling,
Officer
gripping the
Henderson
wheel.
introduced himself.
Thank you.
A young
I
man
whispered,
with tired eyes.
though I wasn't sure to whom.
We're stepping
The
up
woman,
patrol.
the ghost, or my own
He
better
said,
judgment.
I want you
Then
to
I
stay
turned the
alert
truck around and
and
drove
call
home.
immediately if
I
anything
haven't
seems
taken
off,
that
even
road
small
since.
things.
Sometimes when the
I
night
nodded,
gets too quiet, I
too
still hear
anxious
her
to
voice in
speak.
my head, sharp and urgent.
I started keeping
Don't
a
get
journal
out.
of noises,
Evil
people, and
doesn't always
sights.
look like danger.
Every time I heard a
It
crash,
often wears the mask
every
of
sudden
desperation.
movement outside,
Trust
I
your
recorded
instincts,
it.
even when kindness
It helped me
feels
feel
like
some
obligation.
control over a
In a
situation
world
that
where
had
good
felt so
intentions can be
uncontrollable.
used as traps,
I even
survival
talked to neighbors
sometimes
who weren't
depends on
involved,
knowing when not to
sharing
stop.
information cautiously. Some had seen strange cars idling near the duplex weeks before. Others remembered hearing fights late at night. Slowly,
People always
I
think
realized I
long-haul
wasn't
trucking
alone
is
in my
about
fear.
freedom. Open skies,
People
good
wanted
music, and the
safety
hum of
too.
the engine underneath your boots.
In a weird way, that
Maybe
sense
it
of
is for
shared
some folks.
concern gave me a
For
small
me, it's
comfort,
more like living
though
between
it didn't
radio
erase
stations.
the memory of the fire
Always
or the
halfway
image
to
of those
somewhere
hooded
else.
figures weeks past,
Always
but the
missing
tension
something you
never
can't
fully
name.
eased.
I've
I
been hauling
noticed
freight
things.
for 20 years.
A scratch on the window
Electronics
frame,
mostly,
the faint
TVs,
smear of
monitors,
something
gaming
dark on the
systems.
side porch.
The kind of stuff that
Every
costs a
detail
fortune
seemed
but doesn't weigh
significant.
much. It was
Officer
early
Henderson and his
January,
team
right after
occasionally
a
checked
snowstorm
in,
swept across the
but the
Dakotas.
trail went cold more
The
often than
kind
not.
of night where the air feels sharp enough
One
to
evening,
slice through
I
denim.
was in my room, headphones on,
Dispatch gave me a
trying
route
to
from
study.
Minneapolis down to Denver,
Through
about
the thin
1,100
wall,
miles.
I heard muffled
and told me
footsteps,
to take my time.
soft but deliberate.
The load was insured,
My breath
but
hitched.
not urgent.
I pressed my ear
I left
closer,
before sundown,
hearing a whisper
rolling
that sounded
through
like
empty
my name.
fields buried in snow.
Heart racing.
The sky turned
I grabbed
black
my
quick,
phone.
swallowing everything
The
except
hallway
the
was
thin
empty.
ribbon of highway in front
I
of me.
texted my parents.
The CB
They were in
crackled with
bed
a few voices.
and waited for the
Truckers
comfort of
swapping
someone else
jokes,
in the
talking
house.
weather, complaining about DOT
Silence.
checkpoints.
It dawned on
But by
me.
midnight, it was
Danger
just
had
static.
been close. Always
Most folks
closer
pull
than I
over by
wanted to
then.
admit.
I don't.
I had felt safe,
I liked
alone
the
in my
night.
quiet duplex.
Fewer cars.
But the reality
fewer
was that threats
distractions.
could live on the other
Just
side of
me
a
and the
wall,
hum of diesel.
unseen,
Still,
unheard,
there's a loneliness
but
that
real.
creeps in after midnight.
That realization
The road
reshaped
starts to
how I
feel
moved through
endless.
my own home,
Like you're driving
how I
through
locked
space.
doors,
I turned up
how
the
I
heater and the
slept.
radio, but it
Months
didn't help.
later, the
My
duplex
was
coffee had gone
rebuilt.
cold. My eyelids
We
were
moved
heavy.
briefly, though my parents
When I
made
saw
sure
the
the
blue
new
rest
place
area
felt
sign,
safer. Better
next
locks,
right 1
cameras, motion sensors.
It felt like an invitation.
I tried to let the memory
The
fade,
place was dead quiet.
but every sudden crash,
A single
every
pickup sat
whispered
far off
argument
by
in the
trees,
distance
headlights
triggered
dim,
the old
but
fear.
still burning.
Safety
I
is
parked
never
my rig under
guaranteed,
the yellow glow
even
of
in
the
places we
lamppost,
think we know.
climbed down and stretched.
Danger doesn't
The
always
cold
come
bit
from
through
outside.
my gloves instantly.
It can live just inches
I stamped
away,
my boots on the
behind
pavement,
walls,
grabbed
behind
$1
doors,
from my pocket,
hidden in
and went to
normalcy.
the vending machine.
Awareness,
The coffee tasted
caution,
like rust
and
and burnt
respect for our
sugar,
vulnerability,
but it was hot.
became my daily
I
habits.
leaned against the machine,
Even
listening
now,
to the wind
years
whistle
later,
through the trees.
Whenever I hear glass
No sound
shatter,
of cars, no
I
engines.
think of the night the
Just
fire
that
came
eerie
too
stillness
close,
you get in the middle
of the
nowhere.
hooded figures on the wrong
When
wall,
I came back out, someone was
and the
standing behind
fragility
my trailer.
of what we call safety.
At first, I
Life
figured he
teaches
was
you
another
lessons
driver
in subtle
checking
ways,
his tires or hitch.
sometimes
But
with
he didn't
smoke and
move.
fire,
Just stood there,
sometimes
half
with
in the
silence and
shadows,
fear,
coat collar turned up,
but
face
always
hidden.
in ways that stick with you.
Hey, I called out.
True safety isn't
No
about
answer.
walls or locks.
Something inside
It's
me,
about
that
awareness,
old animal sense,
preparedness,
told me to get back in the cab.
and respecting the fragility
I
of the
did.
world around you.
Locked both doors.
Danger can exist
Sat
close
there
to
watching
home,
through the mirror.
and vigilance,
He stayed
caution,
still for a minute, then
and presence
started
of
walking,
mind are
went slow,
essential,
went toward the passenger
even
side.
in the most familiar places.
My pulse spiked. I laid on the horn, long and loud.
Chicago
The guy
winters
froze,
always
then
had a way
sprinted
of
off
making
into
me
the
feel
trees,
smaller.
disappearing into the dark.
Snow swirled along the
I
streets
sat
like
there
it was
shaking,
trying to
heart
erase
pounding
everything
like an engine
beneath it.
misfire.
And the west loop
After
at
a
night
minute,
was
I grabbed
quieter
the
than I'd
mic.
ever remembered. I had just
Breaker
returned from my
19, I
night shift
said.
at the printing company.
Anybody got ears near
Walking past
I-29
shuttered
southbound?
restaurants and empty
Got a
sidewalks,
suspicious guy at the
clutching
Mile
a cup of
84 rest
reheated
stop.
coffee in one hand and a
few
leftover
truckers
container
answered.
in the other.
Nobody nearby.
My 7th floor
I
apartment
waited
felt
a
like a
while,
refuge,
engine idling,
small,
then decided to
cramped,
roll out.
familiar.
I figured maybe he
I
was
slid
some
the
drifter,
container into the
maybe high,
microwave,
maybe just
the
lost.
hum filling the kitchen.
But my gut said
The
otherwise.
radiator rattled
My gut
softly
said,
behind me,
Get
and I
moving.
sank into the couch, letting the warmth
The
seep
highway
through my
looked the
jacket.
same as before,
That's when it
empty
happened.
and endless.
The intercom
Snow
buzzed,
kicked up behind
sharp,
my trailer like smoke.
urgent.
The clock on the
froze,
dash said
letting my
2:17
hand
a.m.
hover in midair.
I tried to focus on
Nobody
the road,
ever
but my
used it.
eyes kept drifting to
Not
the
since
mirrors.
the building installed the panel
Every
5
time
years
the wind
ago.
caught a reflection, I thought
Another
I saw
buzz.
movement.
This time
Paranoia,
a series of
I
short,
told
frantic
myself.
bursts.
Just road
My
fatigue.
pulse quickened.
Still, I
I
couldn't
pressed
shake
the
it.
talk button
My
and said
headlights
cautiously,
carved 2 narrow tunnels into the
"Yeah."
dark, and beyond that,
Static.
nothing.
Then a
Every
soft,
shadow
shaky
looked like
voice.
a man standing on the shoulder.
Please,
Every
let me
flicker
in.
looked like a signal.
someone's following me.
After about an hour, I decided to
frowned,
pull into the next
heart
rest
hammering.
area.
Who's this?
I figured I'd grab another
The
coffee,
camera
check
feed in the
load,
lobby
maybe
showed
catch
only
some air.
fuzzy static.
The place was brighter than the
Broken
last
months
one.
ago.
Newer building.
Are you
more
hurt?
lights. But just
A
as
pause.
empty.
Then in a whisper,
I climbed down and walked
"You
around
don't
the trailer.
remember me, do you?"
My breath hung
My
in the
throat
air,
tightened.
thick and white.
I leaned closer
That's
to the
when I saw
intercom.
Muddy
What?
handprints.
Who are you?
Smeared across the back doors.
You used to live in
High
3B.
Too high
The
for
voice
someone
said,
standing on the
calm
ground.
now, almost
I
eerily
froze.
so.
My flashlight
3B.
beam trembled as I moved
My
it
old
closer.
apartment.
The prints
The
were
one I
long,
left last
streaked
spring after the
downward,
break-in.
like someone had been hanging
I
on
remembered
and
coming
lost their
home to
grip.
shattered glass,
The mud was
scattered
fresh, still
photographs,
wet despite the
but nothing
cold.
stolen.
A chill ran through
The
me
police
that
had
had
said
nothing
it
to do
wasn't
with the
theft.
temperature.
Someone had
I
been
backed
watching.
away, scanning the tree line.
I'd moved upstairs
Nothing
to Unit
moved.
7B,
No sounds
hoping to
except
forget.
the wind. My mind
Who
started
is
spinning.
this? I repeated,
guy from
louder this time.
The last stop been on my
The
trailer the
intercom
whole
clicked.
time. Riding along in the
Silence.
freezing dark, I
Then
didn't
faintly,
even want to think about it.
"You never
I got
fixed
back
the window
in the cab,
lock."
locked up again, and hit the
My
road
eyes
faster
shot
than
to the
before.
living room window.
My hands were
The
shaking
curtains
so
swayed
bad I almost
gently,
dropped my coffee.
though the radiator
On
heat
the
was
radio,
off.
I caught some
The
chatter
lock,
about a state trooper
I
who'd
had
found a
checked it
body
earlier,
near an old rest
was
stop 2
unlatched.
days earlier.
I
I
swallowed
didn't
hard.
have details, but I turned the volume
Whoever
down
you
anyway.
are,
The
I'm
road
calling the
stretched ahead,
police.
black and
I
endless.
whispered.
Every
Before
time
I
my
could,
trailer rattled,
the
I
buzzer
imagined
shrieked
something
again,
banging from inside.
long, piercing.
Every mile felt heavier.
I yanked the cord from the wall and
sunrise, I
stumbled
was
back,
somewhere in
fumbling for
Nebraska.
my phone.
I
Then,
hadn't stopped once.
tap, tap, tap.
My eyes were bloodshot.
The glass
and
rattled.
the heater was barely
A
keeping
muddy
up with the
handprint
cold.
appeared, smeared
I pulled
across
into
the
a truck
inside of the
stop for
pane.
fuel. Parked
My
by the
heart
pump,
slammed against
and
my
just sat
ribs
there
as I
staring at
realized
the steering
someone
wheel.
had been there,
A
right
young
inside
attendant
my
came out,
apartment,
wrapped in a
watching,
hoodie.
waiting.
Morning, he said,
When the
stamping his
officers
feet.
arrived,
Rough night.
the lobby door was
You
locked
could
from
say
the
that.
inside.
He
Nobody
started filling the
outside.
tank, glancing
On the
at the
fire
back of the
escape,
trailer.
partially buried in snow,
What's all that
were
mud from?
footprints leading from the alley.
Wish I knew.
Inside,
I said.
near my window,
He didn't push
were
it.
streaks of grease
Just
and
nodded
fragments
slowly
of
like
wet
he'd
hair
heard
caught in the
stranger
latch.
things.
The
I grabbed
detective
breakfast
asked about
inside
anyone who had
stale
lived in
pancakes,
3B
watery
after me.
coffee,
I didn't know anyone.
and tried to convince
The
myself
unit
it was
had been
over.
vacant.
Probably just some
But checking the
vagrant who
records
climbed up
revealed
looking
one
for a
chilling
ride,
fact.
fell off after
A
a few
missing
miles.
person report from April.
That's what I told myself.
A 22-year-old girl,
But but the image
Last
of those
seen leaving
handprints
Unit
wouldn't leave
3B
me.
after the police left.
Later that afternoon,
I
a state
couldn't
patrol
sleep.
cruiser pulled into the lot.
Every sound
The
in the
trooper came
apartment became
inside, tall
amplified.
guy with mirrored
The
sunglasses
radiator's
despite
gentle
the clouds.
groan, the hum of
He
the
walked straight to
refrigerator,
my booth.
the distant traffic below.
You the driver of that white
Every
Kenworth
shadow
outside?
seemed to hold movement.
Yeah, I said.
I kept glancing at the
Something
window,
wrong?
imagining someone
He held up his
standing there,
badge.
staring in.
You passed through
I
the
called my
I-29
sister,
rest
trying
area
to keep my
around 2
voice
this
steady.
morning? I nodded.
You won't believe what just happened.
We had
I
a
began.
call about a
I
suspicious
told her about
person
the
out
intercom,
there.
the
He
voice,
said,
the handprint.
fits the description of
She
a man we've
gasped
been
and
looking
told me
for.
to stay somewhere else.
Escaped mental patient
But the thought
from
of leaving
Sioux
my
Falls.
apartment, my
Dangerous.
routines, my
May
life
have tried to hitch a
felt
ride.
impossible.
My stomach dropped.
The next morning,
You saying he could have
I
been on
visited
my
the
truck?
building office.
Hard to say.
I asked about the intercom
officer
system,
replied,
any maintenance
"But if you
records,
see or hear anything
and whether
unusual,
anyone knew had
call it in."
access to 3B.
He left after
The
that,
manager shrugged.
but his words sat
No
heavy.
one since you left,
Escaped
she
mental
said.
patient.
The unit's been
Dangerous.
empty aside from inspections.
The idea
Strange
that
stuff
he might have
happens
been
in old
inches from
buildings.
me for miles made my
Strange
skin
didn't
crawl.
cut it. I
I
wanted
checked my
answers.
trailer again before leaving.
I began retracing
The
my
handprints
steps,
had frozen solid
memories
now,
of the break-in
crusted
flooding
in
back,
gray ice.
the shattered window,
I stared at
the
them a
scattered
long time
photographs.
before climbing back into
Nothing
the
had
cab.
been stolen, but
Then
someone
I
had
locked the
clearly
doors
been inside.
again.
Observing,
and
I
rolled
felt a
south.
cold realization settle over me.
Night fell early that day.
Whoever had broken
and
in
with it came
before
the
could
fog.
still know my habits.
The snow had
my
stopped, but the
routines,
world looked washed
perhaps
out.
even my new
Just
apartment.
gray sky
Later
and
that
darker
day,
ground.
I
My
returned to
headlights
3B.
barely cut through.
The door was empty.
The road curved
silent,
endlessly. A black
unremarkable.
ribbon leading nowhere.
But I noticed
I kept
scratches
the
on the
CB
windowsill.
off. Didn't
faint
want to hear
enough that I
anyone,
hadn't
didn't
seen
want
them
to
last
talk,
spring.
just wanted the miles behind
I pressed
me.
my fingers to the
But
grooves.
sometime after 9,
They were fresh.
I started
or
feeling
at
that
least
same
recent.
pressure in my chest.
Someone had been here.
Like eyes on me.
The thought twisted my
The
stomach.
mirrors showed nothing, but I couldn't
Detectives
shake it.
returned the next afternoon.
At a way station outside North
We found
Platte, I
her.
pulled over to check
One
again.
said quietly,
I opened
showing
the
me
back
a
doors
photo
this
from the
time,
police
half expecting
database.
to see something,
A young
or
woman,
someone inside.
scared eyes,
But it was empty.
hair damp and tangled.
Boxes strapped tight.
I realized with a
everything in
jolt.
order. Still,
This must
I
have been
caught
the voice on the
myself
intercom.
whispering, "You're not
She had
back
been
there,
living,
are you?"
trapped somehow,
When
in
I
the
shut the
shadow of
doors,
my
I
old
noticed
apartment.
new marks in
I
the
had
grime.
nightmares that night.
Faint streaks like
Every intercom
fingerprints along
buzz,
the
every
latch.
cough from the
I
radiator
didn't
felt
even
like
check
her whisper.
the ground. I
I
just got
imagined
back
the
in
girl
truck and
crouched
kept
behind
driving.
walls, hiding,
By
reaching out
midnight,
for help.
exhaustion hit hard.
I pictured the person who had
I
trapped
started
her,
seeing things in
watching,
the snowbanks,
waiting for the
shapes,
perfect moment to
movement,
act.
Faces maybe.
I started documenting
I slapped
everything.
myself to stay
Noises,
awake.
irregularities.
The road felt alive,
Strangers in the lobby,
breathing under the
unmarked
tires.
cars on the street.
I pulled into a
It
small
became an
diner off
obsession.
Highway 83
My
just to
routine,
get out.
once simple
Inside,
and
the
quiet,
waitress looked
turned
half
into
asleep.
surveillance. Every
"Coffee?"
day I wondered
she
what had
asked.
been happening in 3B.
"Please,"
and
I said,
whether I
sitting
had
at the
unknowingly
counter.
stepped into
She
danger
poured me a cup
just
and
by
nodded
moving
toward the
back into
window.
my old building. Weeks
"That
went
your
by.
rig out there?"
The girl was
Yeah.
recovered, but the
Why?
man responsible remained at
Saw
large.
someone walk behind it
Police
when you
had
pulled
traced
in.
some digital
She said
footprints,
casually.
online forums,
Thought it was
Craigslist messages.
I felt
patterns
every
of
hair
vacancy,
on my neck rise.
but he was elusive.
"You sure?"
I found myself
"Pretty
constantly
sure,"
on
she
edge,
said, frowning.
checking locks,
Didn't look
peering
like a
down the
trucker,
fire
though.
escape,
No coat.
listening to the
I
faint
ran
hum
outside,
of old
scanning
wiring.
the lot.
I
Empty.
even installed
Just
cameras
wine
outside my
swirling snow
apartment.
across the pavement.
Each night,
I
I would
circled
sit
the
in the
trailer.
dark, watching the
Nothing.
monitors,
No footprints
imagining
even,
shapes moving
like
through
the snow
snow,
had swallowed them.
wondering if someone
I
was
didn't
returning.
sleep that night.
My
I just
friends
drove.
teased me at first,
The road and
but
I
they
were
didn't
one long
understand
stretch
the
of fear.
unease that comes from feeling
I
like
made
someone
Denver
has been
just after
inside your
dawn.
life,
Dropped the trailer at the yard,
unnoticed,
signed the
while you
papers, and
slept,
tried not to think
cooked,
about anything.
and lived.
The dispatcher handed me
I
a new
began
manifest,
speaking
but
to
I
the
told him
neighbors
I needed
more,
rest.
quietly
He nodded,
asking questions,
said I looked
looking
like
for
hell.
patterns,
He
any
wasn't
information that could help police.
That night I checked into a cheap motel off
Some had seen
I-70.
people loitering near the
Peeling
building in the
wallpaper,
weeks
humming
before the
radiator,
girl's
smells like
disappearance.
cigarettes. I took
Others
the
had
longest
noticed
shower of
odd
my
deliveries
life,
to empty
crawled
units.
into bed, and told myself
Everyone
it was
agreed
over.
something was wrong,
Around
but
3 in
no
the
one
morning,
could pinpoint why.
I woke to a noise,
Months
a
passed.
faint thump from
The girl
outside.
recovered physically,
Then
though I
another.
knew scars lingered in
I went to
ways
the
we
window
don't
and pulled
always
the
see.
curtain. My
The police
truck sat
kept
under the
watch,
streetlight,
patrolling the
quiet.
building, and
But
my
the
life
back door,
returned somewhat
the
to
same
normal.
trailer I dropped earlier,
But the
was
quiet,
slightly open.
that comforting silence of my apartment,
I threw on my boots,
never felt the
grabbed
same.
tire
I learned
iron
to
from
lock
under
every
the seat
window,
and stepped into the
check
cold.
the fire escape nightly,
My breath fogged
and
the
question
air.
even the
The
smallest
lot was empty
irregularities.
except for my rig and 2 other semis.
I learned that the world
door
could harbor
creaked as I
danger
pulled it
even in
shut.
familiar places.
Then I saw them.
That safety
More
is
prints.
never guaranteed
Fresh
by
this
walls
time
or
in the
locks
dust
alone.
along the handle. Same
Awareness,
shape, same size.
vigilance, and
I
immediate
reported
action
it to the yard
were
the
as
next
essential
morning.
as anything
They
else.
ran cameras, checked the area.
Even now,
Nothing.
years
no
later,
sign of anyone. No
I pause at
footprints
the
in
intercom,
snow. The cops
glance
said
at
maybe
a
kids
shadow,
messing around.
and remember the
Maybe.
night a voice called
But I
out
knew
from
better.
the past.
I knew someone had been there.
Life moves
watching,
forward.
following, waiting. waiting.
But I carry the
I quit
lesson with
long-haul
me.
trucking a few months later.
Safety is
Took
fragile,
local routes instead.
and sometimes
I
the
tell
most
myself it's
ordinary
for family,
spaces can conceal
for
the
health,
most
for shorter
extraordinary
hours.
danger.
But the
True
truth is, I
safety
still
is
see
not
those handprints
guaranteed
in my
by
dreams.
walls, locks, or
Every time I
routines.
pull into a dark rest
It
stop, I
requires
look twice.
vigilance,
Every time
awareness,
I hear a thump
and the
behind me,
courage
my
to
heart
act when
races.
danger hides in
The
familiar
road
places.
still calls to me sometimes, but
Danger
I've learned
can be
something out there
closer
in the
than we
cold.
imagine.
The highway's
and
not empty.
preparedness is the
It
only
never is.
protection we truly
No matter
control.
how experienced or prepared you think you are, always trust your instincts. Sometimes the danger
The
isn't
rain
the
had
road,
been
the weather, or
relentless
the
all
load you
evening,
carry.
drumming
It's the
against the
silence, the
windows
stillness,
of
the
flat
sense that something
14B
just
like it
isn't
had a
right.
message to deliver.
Those feelings exist to protect
Bristol's
you.
autumn
In
chill
life, as on the
crept under
highway,
the
ignoring
door
them might cost
and through
you
the
more than a
drafty
night's
window
sleep.
frames.
It might
But I
cost
barely
you everything.
noticed I was Elena Ward, 29, a social worker who had spent the last
I've
3
never
weeks
liked long
moving
country
between
drives at night,
crisis
but
calls,
sometimes you don't have a
clients,
choice.
and paperwork.
That Friday, my coworker
Finally,
Ben had invited a
tonight,
few of us to his
I
cabin
had
to
the
celebrate
apartment to
finishing
myself.
a big project.
I poured a glass of
place
red
sat
wine and
miles off
sank
the
into
main
the
road.
couch,
No
dimming
cell
the lights
service, no
to a
neighbors,
soft
just
golden
pine trees
glow.
and stars.
Crime
We grilled,
documentaries had
drank a
become
few
a guilty
beers, and
comfort
told
for me.
old work stories around
Half
the
for
fire.
the story,
By
half
midnight,
to
the
remind
laughter
myself
faded
that other
into
people
yawns,
had
and
worse
everyone was
nights
either
than
asleep
mine.
or staying over.
My laptop
I
hummed
decided to
softly
head
as I
home.
replied to a few emails.
I told myself I'd be
fingers
fine.
flying across the keyboard.
The air was cool, the sky
building
clear,
was
and I
old.
wanted my own bed.
Pipes groaned when
Ben
someone
warned me,
upstairs ran
"Watch
water.
the deer on Route
and
12.
thin
They
walls
love
made every
jumping out of
sound a
nowhere."
little too intimate. I could
I
hear my
promised I'd
neighbor's
drive
television, as if it were
The
in my
first
own
few
room.
miles were peaceful.
Normally,
Just the hum
it
of
was a
tires
comfort,
and the rhythmic
a
flash of
background
white
murmur.
road lines.
Tonight,
My gas gauge
it felt
hovered
like
near
a warning.
empty, but I figured
At
I could make it to
11:42
the next
p.m.,
town.
the landline
Then
rang.
the road narrowed.
My
The trees
landline.
thickened and the night
I
pressed
rarely
in.
used it.
No
For a
streetlights,
moment,
no
I thought my
houses.
eyes were playing
Just black
tricks.
forest swallowing
I
both
stared at
sides
the
of the
tiny
car.
screen.
That's
The
when I
number
saw her.
flashing back at me
At
wasn't
first, she
someone
was
else's.
just a blur caught in
It
my
was my
headlights.
own.
Arms
I
flailing,
laughed
coat
nervously.
soaked, hair plastered
Maybe
to her
fatigue
face.
was making me see
I
things.
eased off the gas
But
and rolled my
curiosity
window
won
down a
over
crack.
fear. I picked up.
"You okay, ma'am?"
Hello.
I called.
A
She
man's
stumbled
voice,
toward me, breathless.
polite and toneless,
"Please,"
responded.
she said, voice
Good
trembling.
evening, Elena.
My car
You left
broke
your
down.
kitchen light on.
I've been walking for
My
hours.
heart stopped.
I just need to get
Sorry,
to town.
who is this?
Something
There
about
was a
her
soft
eyes
chuckle.
unsettled me. They kept
You should
darting
turn
over
it
my
off
shoulder
before it
the
gets
dark
their
woods
attention.
behind her.
The
"Where's
line
your car?"
went dead.
I asked.
I
She pointed
froze,
vaguely down the road,
staring toward the
a few
dark
miles
hallway
back.
leading to my kitchen.
I didn't want to stay there.
Sure enough,
"Please,
the
can you
light was
drive
still
me
on.
just to the gas
My
station?"
laughter felt
I
brittle.
hesitated. She
I
looked
told myself
genuinely
it was a
terrified,
prank,
but not
a
the kind of
coincidence.
scared that comes from being
Maybe a
stranded.
neighbor who had my number.
It
I
was
turned off
deeper,
the
like
light,
she'd seen
locked
something.
the door, and
I
tried to
said, "I can
relax.
call for help when I get signal."
Then, the
her
intercom
face
buzzed.
changed instantly. "No,
My
don't call
stomach
anyone.
sank.
Please, just
The
drive."
building's screen flickered
That's
to
when I
life,
saw the footprints,
showing a
Two
distorted
sets of
black
them,
and
muddy
white image
fresh,
of a
one
man in a
leading from the
raincoat
woods to
holding a
where she
paper
stood,
bag.
another heading back.
He didn't move.
My stomach
look up.
tightened. Before I
pressed
could
the
react,
button.
she screamed, "He's
Who is
still
it?"
here!" and ran into the
Delivery
open
for
field
Elena
beside
Ward.
the road.
The man said.
Then something
calm,
moved in the trees,
almost low.
a tall shadow, fast and
I-
deliberate, stepping into the edge
I didn't
of my
order
headlights.
anything.
Instinct
I
took
stammered.
over. I
After
slammed
a
the
pause,
gas
he
and
said,
tore down the road, my heart
didn't.
hammering so hard I could barely
But he
breathe.
did.
I didn't
Then
stop
the screen
until I
went
reached
black.
the main highway. I barely
My
slept.
pulse raced as I called
My mind
Liam,
replayed every
my
second.
coworker and
The
closest
woman's
friend.
face, her voice,
Lock
the shadow.
everything and call the
By
police.
dawn, I convinced
He
myself
instructed
it must have been
immediately.
something explainable.
His voice tense.
Maybe she was running from someone.
obeyed,
Maybe I'd overreacted.
checking every window,
Still, I couldn't shake the
every
thought
lock,
that she needed help.
every chain.
So around 10 a.m., I
and
called
yet,
the county sheriff.
the kitchen light
The
flickered back
dispatcher
on.
sounded skeptical, but sent a
My knees
patrol to
buckled.
check. 2
I
hours
crept
later,
closer,
an officer called back.
keeping the chain latched.
"Sir, we found a car
and noticed
matching
faint
what you
movement.
described. Silver
A shadow
sedan nose
pacing,
down in a ditch off
shifting
Route 12.
back and forth.
Was she there?"
My
I
phone
asked. No
buzzed.
sign of anyone. Car was
Liam's
empty.
message.
Doors unlocked, keys still
Are you
inside.
okay?
"We'll keep looking."
I typed back,
The officer
trembling.
paused. "You did the right thing.
Someone's in my
leaving when
kitchen.
you felt unsafe."
Before I could finish,
I wanted
the
to
power
believe
went
him,
out.
but something about his tone said
The
he didn't
apartment
buy
fell
my
into
story
near total
completely.
darkness, save
That
for the
night,
occasional
I sat on
flash
my
of
porch
lightning
staring into the
outside.
dark fields. Every
The
rustle of
landline
wind
rang
made me
again.
flinch.
I
At
lifted
one
the
point,
receiver,
I thought I heard crying
hands
somewhere
shaking.
far off, but
I told
when
you
I
to turn
stepped
the
into
light
the yard,
off,
it was silent
the voice
again.
whispered.
2
This
days later,
time,
I stopped at a
almost
diner
gentle,
near the highway for
as if
breakfast.
mocking my fear.
The
I
waitress, an
barely
older
remembered
woman with
breathing
silver
as I
hair,
clutched the phone.
noticed me staring at the TV
The police
above
arrived
the counter.
15 minutes later,
A news segment
lights
was
cutting
playing.
across the rain-slick public
Authorities
street.
continue searching for a
When
missing
they
woman
entered,
whose
everything
car was
seemed
found
normal.
abandoned on Route
At first,
12.
front door locked from
I
the
froze.
inside.
It was her.
No signs
the same
of struggle.
face, same coat.
No forced
The reporter
entry.
said her name was
But
Rachel
the kitchen
Cooper.
told a different story.
32, missing since
The
Friday
chain
night.
was snapped clean through.
The waitress caught
and
my
on the
expression.
table sat a still warm
You know her.
teacup and a delivery
I
receipt,
hesitated.
time-stamped
I saw her that
11:47
night.
p.m.
Her eyebrows lifted.
I read the name
Then
aloud.
you better tell somebody.
Ward,
That afternoon,
Elena,
I met with the sheriff
apartment
in person.
9.
He took my statement
The
again,
officers
slower
exchanged
this time.
glances.
So she
The
told you
building
not to
had
call
no
for
apartment
help, he
9.
asked. Yeah,
I
she
sat
seemed
on my
scared,
couch,
like she was hiding
wrapped
from
in a
someone.
blanket, watching the
He leaned
officers
back in his
sweep the
chair.
apartment
We found
They
more
treated me
footprints
with
near
the
the
calm
car.
professionalism
2
I
sets,
needed,
like you said,
but their
the
faces
second
betrayed
pair,
confusion.
smaller, barefoot.
Who could have
barefoot,
access to a
in that
non-existent
freezing rain.
apartment? One
The
asked.
sheriff said they'd searched the
I
woods
didn't
again.
know.
I left
I
his
tried to
office
reason
shaken,
it out.
wondering
Prank,
if I'd
a
escaped
delivery
something worse
mistake,
than I realized.
someone with building
A
plans
week
memorized.
passed. I
None
tried
of it
moving
explained
on,
the
but every
voice,
night the
the
same dream
landline call,
returned.
the kitchen
woman's
shadow.
scream, the shadow
The
stepping from the
detective
trees.
encouraged me to write down every
Then one
detail I
evening
could
Ben
remember.
called. "You're
I
not gonna
described the
believe this,"
distorted
he
man
said.
on the intercom.
Cops were by my
The
place
precise
this morning.
timing.
They
The
found something
whispering
near the
voice,
creek.
the paper
What was
bag,
it? Just
and
an
the
old
fact that the
campsite.
kitchen light
But
had
get
turned
this,
on
there was
and
a
off
phone charger
seemingly
in a
on its own.
woman's shoe.
I realized
the
then
room
that
tilt.
apartment 9 wasn't
Rachel?
just non-existent
Maybe,
on paper.
they didn't say.
It didn't appear
That
anywhere
night
in
I
the
drove
building's
back toward the
blueprints
area.
either.
I don't know why,
And yet,
maybe guilt, maybe curiosity.
Something had been there.
The forest road was muddy.
That night,
the same
I
one
barely
I'd flown
slept.
down that night.
Every creak
When I
in the
reached the
building
spot where
felt
I'd seen her, I
amplified.
pulled over.
Every
The
distant
rain
drip
had
of
started
water
again,
a
soft
warning.
and cold.
I kept
stepped
checking
out
the
with a
hallway,
flashlight.
the front door,
The field was
kitchen
quiet
chain,
except for the hiss
the
of
idea
drizzle
that
on
someone
grass.
or
I
something
almost convinced
could
myself it was
exist in a
over
space that didn't
until I
exist.
saw fresh footprints
Haunted
again.
me.
Bare ones.
Over the next
They
week,
led from the ditch straight
I
to
became
where
a
I
ghost
stood,
in
then
my own
vanished.
home.
A whisper drifted through the trees,
I started
faint but
documenting
unmistakable.
everything.
Don't call for help.
Timestamps for noises,
The investigation
shadows,
fizzled after 2
misplaced
weeks.
objects.
No body, no suspect, no
I began
answers.
speaking to
The
neighbors
sheriff figured
quietly,
Rachel ran off or
asking
met
if
someone
anyone
out
had
there.
seen strange
But I
deliveries,
couldn't let it go.
people in the hall.
One night I got an
Unusual
envelope in my
activity.
mailbox, no return
Most
address.
shrugged,
Inside
distracted
was a
by their
photo
own
taken from
lives.
behind me.
A few
showing
looked
my truck parked
uncomfortable.
on Route 12.
One elderly
Scrawled on the
woman
back,
whispered about
"You
the
should have
old
listened."
service corridor that had been
I
sealed
moved to the
years
city
ago,
soon after,
forgotten by
traded
management.
country roads for noise
She
and
said
street
rumors
lights.
floated that
Still,
someone
sometimes
occasionally
when I'm
moved
driving
there,
late and the gas
but no one
gauge
could
dips low,
confirm.
I catch myself
I
glancing at the
decided
shoulder,
to investigate,
half expecting to see her
cautiously.
standing there again.
I discovered
Arms
a narrow
waving,
service hallway
eyes
behind
wide
a
with
panel in the
fear.
basement,
And every
barely
time I
wide
do, I
enough
keep
for a
driving.
single person.
Instinct is a
It had
voice older
old
than
pipes,
reason.
electrical
When it whispers,
conduits,
listen.
and faded
Compassion
numbers
is
scribbled
noble,
on the wall,
but blind trust in the
including
dark can cost more than courage.
Apartment 9.
It can cost survival.
The number was scratched
Some
and
cries for
worn,
help are warnings meant to
almost
save
deliberately
you.
obscured. A chill ran down my spine. Apartment 9 had existed once. Someone
I've worked
or
night
something
deliveries for almost 6
had
years.
reclaimed it in ways
It's
no
quiet
one
work.
accounted for.
Pays the bills and gives me time
Months
to think.
passed.
The roads at night
Management
are usually my
sealed the
kind
service
of peace.
corridor permanently.
No traffic, no
Police
calls from the
investigated
boss,
my report,
just me,
and no one
the hum
claimed
of the band,
responsibility for
and
the
the glow
calls
of
or
the
the delivery.
dashboard.
I tried to resume normal
But
life,
that peace turns
but my
fragile when you
perception of
spend too
safety
many
had
nights
shifted.
alone on the road.
I became meticulous.
Sometimes it feels like the
checking
dark is
locks,
listening.
avoiding
That
leaving
Friday
lights on
started like any other.
unnecessarily, questioning the
I'd
ordinary.
clocked
I
in around
installed
5
extra
at
security
20
cameras
Pine
and
Bite
alerted
Eats,
neighbors to
a small
irregularities.
delivery hub tucked behind
The
a gas
building was the
station at
same,
the edge of town.
yet different.
We
I had
serviced all the
seen that a
mountain
place could
cabins
exist
scattered through
quietly,
the valley.
hidden from
Around
official
11:30
maps,
p.m., I
and
got a
someone
late
could
night
use
order,
it to unsettle the
chili and
ordinary.
cornbread from a Marty's
Even
Diner.
today, when
One
I
of our
passed my
regulars.
building, my
The
eyes
address
flicked
looked new.
toward the basement panels,
72 Hollow
the
Creek
doors
Road.
to the sealed hallways.
Never heard of that one.
The
I
apartment
muttered.
that shouldn't exist
Tina, our
reminded me
dispatcher,
that the
glanced at her
familiar isn't
screen.
always safe,
Customer must be
that our
way out.
assumptions about
Says leave on
security are
porch.
fragile.
You okay taking
Awareness, vigilance,
I said.
and courage
Last
to
run
act
anyway.
are the tools we
The bag
actually
smelled
control.
good. Still warm.
I still enjoy
I
evenings
loaded
at home,
it up, grabbed a
but I
thermos
leave
of
lights
coffee
on,
and set off.
doors locked,
The
and
GPS showed a
occasionally
40-minute drive
I
into the
pause
back
before
country.
answering unknown
The road
calls.
twisted past pine forests and
The
creeks
world
that
is
glittered
ordinary,
faintly in the moonlight.
But danger can exist in
The air
corners
grew
we don't
colder,
think to
the
notice.
fog thicker.
Safety isn't
My cell
guaranteed
signal
by
dropped to a
walls,
single bar,
locks, or routines
Then
alone.
nothing. I kept
True
driving.
protection comes from vigilance.
That's when I saw it.
awareness,
A tall
and the
figure
courage
standing
to
dead
act when the
center in the
world
road
hides
ahead,
secrets
half
in
hidden by
familiar
fog.
places.
I slowed down,
Ordinary
rolled
spaces
the
can
window an
conceal
inch.
extraordinary danger,
Hey,
and
you waiting for
preparedness
food?
is the only control we
No
truly
answer.
hold.
I blinked, and the figure was gone. Just fog swirling in my headlights. My pulse kicked up. Probably just the mist, I told myself. But my gut said otherwise. A mile later, the GPS announced I'd reached the address. A dark cabin sat off to the right. No lights, no cars, nothing. The porch sagged under years of rain.